Hello everyone, let's see if we can get this working. Let's see if we can keep this working. Hello! Hello Carl Van Gasberg. Hello Peter Dawson. Hello John Shea. Hello Albert Zavsky. Hello Timmy Luca. Hello Daniel Deadleaf Coons. Welcome. I don't think I've seen you before. Hello Dub Squad. Hello DG40. Hello everyone. How are we all doing today? I think I'm starting right on time. And because I'm starting right on time, I'm going to quickly start off with this one. As you all know, small thing going on, a small challenge. My lovely aunt, God bless her, when she saw that I was doing this Spreadshirt site, made another bet. Another family bragging rights bet. This time she feels sure she's going to win because there's no way she thinks I can double my numbers by December the 31st from when she set the bet, which would be to get to 13,000 subscribers. Currently, I'm at 6,000. Let me just check the numbers. If I go to the dashboard and check, I'm at 6,575. So she's probably right to be fairly confident. In fact, honestly, I can't say I blame her. But if I win, and if I do get to 13,000 subscribers, she is going to take a photo of her and my uncle wearing Blackburn face masks that I'll be able to post. So, and put up on the lovely cruise ships on the 2nd of January. So, it's you and your help I depend on to get there. Anyway, today's topic. Some critical but not problem shipbuilding trends of the 1880s to 1950s. Just some fun stuff to talk about. And I'm going to get this off because even if I am in a travel lodge, it's not right wearing a hat inside. And hello, Greg Sarsky. Hello, Carl Van Gasberg. Hello, Lionheart X-Ray. Hi, you in a hotel? Yes, I am. Well, a travel lodge. Well, doing it on time. Yes, I am on time. Right, so if I remember to actually email the details to Tookie, I'm going to be at HMS Belfast in a few weeks' time with the Wargaming Pit team to say hi to people. Mainly because, and this is rather like why we do Armchair Admirals, but they said the words to me and Drac, we've got HMS Belfast for the day. If you can imagine two naval historians such as us in that moment, we kind of did impressions of meerkats. Mm-hmm. You have Belfast. We'll be there. Now, because of this, I think I do have Iron Brew, but it's in a white hotel mug. It's fine. It's not the same as my big glass mug, but that's at home in my office. Take care, Wayne Boring. Was awake all night and needed to beat a pillow to death for my head. Good luck. Strub, what was your favourite episode to do? Favourite episode to do so far? Probably it was actually the first episode because I've been trying to figure out a way of working these little ships, this lovely little Archer class, into a topic. And please note, I have a big screen this side because I've turned the TV into my second screen. So if I'm ever looking at something, it's because I can see the thing off that side. Because I've been figuring out a way to try and work out the Archer class into a discussion for a while, mainly because the comments did start. The amount of people who go, but this cannot be a forerunner of the tribals, and actually it is. The problem is cruisers. Even in 1880s, cruisers are starting to get too big and too expensive for all the cruiser roles. But sloops and destroyers aren't able to. Your option is to either build up sloops or torpedo boats to the level at which they can do the roles. They look like cruisers, or build down cruisers. And the trouble is, if it makes more sense in the 1880s, especially, to build down cruisers, because cruisers are your powerful ships and your useful ships, because everyone knows what you're getting when you're selling a cruiser. This is half the trouble. You have to remember, half the time it's a treasury battle. It's a battle of perception. It's like, why do we call them fast battleships, not battle cruisers? Because battle cruiser has bad juju. It's bad politics. So we call them fast battleships. But if you were building a proper battleship and sticking it next to a fast battleship, and you were sitting next to you had a battle cruiser and an older battleship from previous generations sitting next to each other, you would sit there and go, well, that must be a battle cruiser. And then go, no, it's a fast battleship. But it's not got as good an armor. It sacrifices armor for speed. No, it's a fast battleship. And the trick they're getting away with us, the reason they get away with us, is they're not building battleships. If you built the G3s, they would have been fast battleships if you hadn't built the M3s. The big battleships. So it's like that with these little cruisers. They are the Royal Navy's present ships in the 1880s. They are a way to churn out a class. And with their torpedo capabilities, they have gun capabilities, which mean they can deal with anything smaller. And the torpedoes mean they are a threat to anything bigger. And that matters. That's what they're for. And they're really cool little ships also. They have some really interesting histories. I might at some point do a profile on them and go through each one's little career, because they're rather... how do I put this? They're rather special in their own way. They have these lovely lines. They have these lovely little sort of careers. And for their time, they cram a lot into them. They really do. Hello, John Evans. Hello, Stafford. Going to get into the brick in the HMS Belfast. I've been there and got stuck. I have been in many, many places on Belfast. So far managed to not get stuck, but that was pre-lockdown weight game. So, who knows. Hello, Zachary Gherkin. Hello, Richard. Hello, Seneca Niran. Hello, Aegis Flow. Hello, Alfred B228. Hello. I'm not sure if I've seen you before, so hello. And so are they destroyers? Well, that's the interesting thing. They carry torpedoes and they carry guns to destroy torpedo boats, really. But they are technically called cruisers. They are the Archer class. They're these little ships which are just cool. And there is a good reason they're not really called destroyers, because, although, interesting enough, Archer class has been a patrol vessel in the Royal Navy. Well, that's what it is currently. Prior to that, it's also been, I think, a destroyer. I'm not sure. Torpedo cruiser is what they are technically called. But HMS Archer herself was a destroyer at one point, the Acheron class destroyer, built in the 1910s. But these are called torpedo cruisers. And the theory is they replace existing sloops, and they give you something which is as cheap and as simple to operate as a sloop, displacing 1,798 tons. So it's that 1,800 ton mark, that number at which you can tend to build quite decent numbers of ships and fairly cheaply operate them. It has a top speed of 17.5 knots at forced draft, always a good thing. A range of 7,000 nautical miles at 10 knots, so that's quite useful, especially in this period. 6 6-inch guns, 6 3-pounder guns, 2 machine guns, and a 14-inch torpedo in the bow, and 2 pairs of side-launching 14-inch torpedoes. Very minimal armour, in that technically has a 9.5mm deck armour, so might as well not be there, 25mm gun shield, and a 75mm conning tower. But the names of the class are what always interest me, because this shows you what they're for. There is HMS Archer, HMS Mohawk, HMS Brisk, HMS Porpoise, HMS Cossack, HMS Tartar, HMS Serpent, and HMS Raccoon. And if you haven't guessed, yes, the fluffy research assistant is with me. Hence in the travel lodge. Someone's making a noise elsewhere. Definitely bad of them. Shouldn't make a noise in his travel lodge. So given the time period you're looking at, what 10-year period did have the tech had the largest jump? Largest jump. Well, tech tends to do that. So it's always curving and going in the sort of, it doesn't do a nice sort of like that. But if we're being honest with tech, it does like that sort of things. And I would say the biggest jump I would go in terms of technological development is the 1930s in the period I've covered, because that's when a lot of the tech is developed. It's implemented in the 1940s, and then there's post-World War II, there's a bit of a cool down. But it's really, most of it's developed in the 1930s, so I'd say 1930s is when it's developed. So that's, I would say, it's when the tech is sort of has the largest jump. John Evans, I was asking, they're cruiser toys. John Evans, were they called the third class cruiser? Not at any point, really. They're called torpedo cruisers. So pretty much they're fourth class cruisers, if anyone's going to be honest. But I'd say they're more used than most third class cruisers at this point. Let's put it this way: if I had to be on a distant station and deal with a potential enemy battleship or cruiser, I think I would have preferred to be in one of these than a third-class cruiser. Because at least this is a case of, yes, you will sink me, but I've got 14-inch torpedoes, which will probably do enough damage to sink you. So, yeah, I'll be dead, but so will you be. It's sort of mutually assured destruction deterrence. Alfred B228. How effective are bow torpedoes? Terribly ineffective, really. You launch it, but the trouble is if the torpedo goes wrong, you run straight into it. But, considering they have a top speed of 17.5 knots, it's going to take them a while to catch up their torpedoes. So, it's probably good. It's probably something to have. And you basically aim it by aiming the ship. HMS Serpent and Raccoon, interesting pair. Yeah, they are. Strub, Doctor, why do love of sponsor-mounted secondary, not just have blast shields and mount them on deck. Actually, that's the 6-inch guns. And they are mounted, I would argue, like that to provide them with better all-around forward fire. So this way, they can fire 4 guns forward, 4 guns aft, and 3 gun broadside each side. So we always you have to remember the battles that have gone on in this period and the amount of importance of forward fire that's now associated after those certain battles, especially a certain one in the Adriatic, etc. Lisa. So yeah, at this point, there are still a lot of sessions with the idea of potentially ramming your opponent, although these ones wouldn't ram, they'd fire a torpedo from their bow at them. But they have a lot of forward firing fire. And they, of course, still have a full rigging scenario in case they run out of coal and wherever they are in the world and can sail, theoretically. Yes, the FRA is here. As a ski, a small light cruiser maybe. Did they ever operate as part of torpedo floaters or strictly cruiser role? Mainly in the cruiser role, but occasionally operated as pairs, as a sort of we have a theoretical we have something with the power of a flotilla wandering around here. Animal 16368. What's your armament on the your opinion on the best anti-torpedo armament would be? 3-inch, 4-inch, or 5-inch? If you're dealing with a torpedo boat, if you can have a rapid-firing 3-inch, that's probably going to be your best bet because they are small and you want to have rapid fire. But there again, 5-inch and 4.5-inch, etc., have fragging ability. So your best anti-torpedo boat system is going to depend on the size of the ship. Because if your primary armament is 6-inch and you have you're picking a general purpose secondary, you probably want to pick a general purpose secondary which can do both roles. In which case, you're probably looking at 4.5, and that'll be fine. Or 5. If you're doing 5-inch secondary though to a 6-inch primary, then you look weird. You might as well be carrying more 6-inch is usually the idea. So it makes more sense to go 3-inch at that point. It depends what your depends what your role is. In the 1880s and 1890s, you're probably talking somewhere in the region of the 6-pounder, which is a 75 mil, which is pretty much a 3-inch gun, and that's probably the best at that point. Street Racer, hello, Street Racer. Clearly, they should have had a 200-foot spar torpedo with guiding lines holding up the spar, then just ram other ships. Well, it could have been interesting. The 3 major tech jumps to me are the Industrial Revolution, the time period you just mentioned, and then the late 90s, early 100s, the 2000s. Oh boy, wait, what? I can't answer. Not sure why. But I just imagined a torpedo mounted on a 14-inch in length spar. No, it's a 14-inch torpedo. Diameter again. It's the whole Navy thing. It's sort of, you sit there and go, you're mounting a 6-inch gun, which is as long as a toothbrush. No, it's that. It's the same with a 14-inch. Slightly better than spar torpedo. Hello, Rowan Cash. Hello, Jared Bertrands. Hello. I think I've seen you before, Jared, and haven't seen you in a while, Roland, so hello. And hello, Melanie 1640. John Evans, 1880 to 90 ships are getting obsolete pretty fast, which moves from compound to Harvey steel to Krupp and quick-firing guns come in. To be honest, and I will go back to them, whilst these ships are in many ways victims of Fisher, these ships actually, I would argue, become obsolete far less quickly. It's, how do I put this? It's like the River class OPVs. In the nicest way, They are a ship which is there for presence and maritime security. There isn't much on them that can go obsolete. But nothing much that can't be quickly and easily changed if you really want to. You want to put quick firing guns in, you can put quick firing guns on this thing. It can support them. It's not that difficult to upgrade because it's a very basic design. It's one of the joys of history when you start looking at defense and you start looking at procurement. You need the high end and high tech stuff. You really do for warfighting. You need it at the top end. But that's the stuff which gets obsolete very, very quickly. It's kind of like your average rifle and pistol. Okay? If we think about it, if you turn around and you tell someone, we're using the same warship we've had for the last 40 years, then people look at you and sort of go, is it an aircraft carrier? No. Why then? But if you turn around and say, well, we've got the same pistol we've been using since, I don't know, the 1950s, no one's going to look at you as if you're too much of an idiot. They're just going to go, suppose you heard about other things which are more important to upgrade. This is the naval equivalent of, as I said, the present ship. This is the, I've got enough firepower that you can't ignore me, but I've not got so much firepower that I'm a massive threat, and therefore you have to listen when I turn up, but you can't claim you're scared or intimidated of me. And frankly, there's nothing on me much can go wrong, or nothing much I need to replace. So you are right, John Evans, when you say 1880s to 90s ships get obsolete fast. The high-end ones do. They're out of date within 3 or 4 years. But I would argue the low-end or middle-of-the-road one like this, they don't. Because what they built to do, they can still do that perfectly. How many 14-inch torpedoes did these have? Well, they had a pair of launchers each side and the bow launcher, and they carried, I think it was, there's dispute to this and different ones, but they seem to have stocked reloads for each launcher, so they could fire multiple rounds. So, but remember, they can move the torpedoes from their magazine to any of their launchers. So if you are, they're technically carrying 15, I think it's 15 to 18 torpedoes. Ron Cash, same jet since the late 70s, F-15, through several variations, but it's basically the same design, yes. It's been several more iterations, though. Right. Albazuski, dual 6-pounder mounts were brutal against torpedo boats. That they were. Ron Cash, why choose just one rapid-fire caliber when you can be the French? Logistics, maintenance, giving your procurement officer panic attacks. There are numerous good reasons. Hello, Yickers. Brent Paulus, just finished Paul's Holocaust show. Ready for something lighter. This will definitely be lighter. As said, I am travelling, so I basically rig things for the week around, the couple of weeks around my mum's birthday, etc. When officially I was supposed to be in Cornwall for 2 weeks, but then that got cancelled, and I ended up having to go down to Cornwall anyway because of family stuff and dealing with various things. And now I'm going back. But it's a case of I scheduled these things. I thought these 2 weeks are going to be busy anyway, so I will make them in a way light and easy, so that they're going to be nice for people to listen to and far more easy for me to present on the move. Joe Reference, usually have to watch after the fact. Well, it's very good to have you hear us for live. And hello, Richard Author. Animal 16365. It may be obsolete, but that doesn't mean it can't be dangerous. 15 to 18 fish and 2 launchers. A pair of launchers each side and 1 forward launcher, so 5 launchers. But she can launch 2 on each broadside and 1 forward. I was going to say, not much more can be done when it comes to powder-based firearms. Right now, it's small tweaks to operate systems and peripherals. Otherwise, we're waiting for the next big thing in this. Santa Canary, can you compare shipbuilding from 1880s to 1940s with computer tech from 1970s to today? To an extent, you can. If you consider one of the interesting things, when I'm teaching the IT students, although we don't call them IT students anymore, we don't call it. It's not called information technology. It's called all sorts of different different sort of areas. But broadly speaking, if I'm teaching them the history of information technology and computing, one of the interesting things is that the vast majority of the critical people and the people that have made critical decisions that still shape the landscape and the geography of it today are still alive. The thing you have to remember in the 1880s to the 1940s is that the vast majority of people who were the key designers in the 1880s and were really critical to the projects were not alive in the 1940s or nowhere near their posts. Now, A, that's because you're dealing with a smaller group of people. B, you're dealing with a shorter life expectancy. But also, you're dealing with a far more rapid turnover in personnel in many respects. And each generation of designers comes through, pushes it forward a leap, and then another group comes through and pushes it forward. So I would say almost you're dealing with more progression than you probably have in computer tech, because I would argue that to an extent things like Ohm's law, etc., in computer tech have it seems to me it's sort of plateaued a bit in the last 10 years. Richard, it is as if some of these obsolete ships are like Swiss Army knives, can be used for nearly anything. Pretty much. Ryan Cash, are you coming to TACFest this year, Dr. Clark? I'm not sure. If I'm free and I'm able to make it, I will wander down at least one day. I would like to come there. Mainly because there's a whole load of tanky YouTubers who I'd like to go and chat with, because I want to get their ideas about amphibious tanks. Because at some point I do want to do a video on that sort of topic. Right then, we are now into the 1890s. Now, of course, this was where I brought in the Odin of the Swedish Odin class, and, the French. Yeah, I just don't find it. They're just wrong. In so many ways, they are just wrong. But no. And there was quite a few people going, why didn't you use the German Odin? And I went, in the nicest way, I prefer the Swedish one. Also, it's kind of cool. It is kind of a cool ship in that, to me, the Swedish Odin class is in many ways a proto-dreadnought. In that everything is structured around those big guns. Yes, it might not have an all big gun armament, but if you look at it, most dreadnoughts other than Dreadnought end up not having an all big gun armament. They have a reality they're going to have to deal with torpedo boats. So it's all structured around doing the best it can with the big guns it has. And then it has these sort of secondaries. And they're good looking. They are good looking ships. It's also one of the things when I start sort of talking and looking at the Swedish Navy and looking at the work the Swedes put into it, I am more and more convinced that the Germans wouldn't have found Sweden an easy walk over it. Quiet. Don't worry, just your brother coming in. Right. Yes. Eric Vasava. I was asking, Doopy Delome. Doopy Delome is not on here. Doopy Delome does come up later, but not on here. Carl Gosworth. Some Austro-Hungarian 1900 or a bit earlier torpedo boats were written off in 1959. I hope some might pop up still in forgotten yards. They might well do. Dove's got a Dr. Clark and Chieftain collaboration. Ooh, that'd be fun, but I'm not sure if the Chieftain even knows who I am, let alone if I exist. I'm a bit below his level. Let's see. There is going to be a lot of interesting stuff on, probably. Hello. I think I might have just gone dead for a bit, but hopefully not too dead. And I'm back. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened. I'm not sure if you heard my a small rant about the F-35. And let's see. The whole point about the F-35 is that well, the F-35 probably will be the last fighter aircraft because if it's it's going to be so much difficult to get funding for a new aircraft that the next generation will be called. Well, the F-35 will get up to the DE and F variants. Then there'll be the Super F-35, which will be the GH and I and the JK and L. And then there'll be the Duper Duper F-35, which will be MN and O. And on that, and probably at some point, there'll be an F-35 AAA. 900 X-ray. With a name like Odin, it should be a cool battleship. It is. I would have preferred one called 4, because I think there should be a battleship which says, I'm bringing the hammer. But, yeah. That would be military. I would pay good money to have an HMS 4 with the motto being bringing the hammer. The struggle. How bad would the French have been smashed if they got into a war in the 1890s? I don't think they'd have even existed. Hello, Felix B. I was actually speaking Irish American accent. Amphibious tanks? What were they thinking? I can fit in with my hat. I can bail out. Oh, the tank is on fire and sinking at the same time. Oh, don't know. I know. It's fun. Wrong cash, and they've just realised the F-15 is needed to carry big missiles that they can't fit in the internal bays in F-22s and F-35s. Not to mention cheaper to run and faster. Yeah, I'm not on free Wi-Fi. I'm on my mobile phone. No, 1640. Hotels internet use your allocation of bandwidth. Please insert 5 quid if you'd like another morsel of bandwidth for the day. No, the hotel's Wi-Fi isn't actually working. I'm running it off my phone. Hello, Michael Truitt. Don't worry, I'm back. Hello, Rush. If you... Hello, Jay Illingworth. Hello, Paul Wordsworth. Listen, managed to completely skip over what I said about regarding the F-15. No, I didn't. I answered the F-15 one. I said that the F-15 is lovely, and the F-15 of course, can be in it. But, hey. Zachary Gherkin, there was supposed to be a T-class with the name 4. Don't know what the motto would have been. It has to be bring the hammer. It has to be. If you're going to do a 4, it has to be bring the hammer. What class of ship would you bring a mod? Would you pick for a modern 4? A cruiser, a decent cruiser. Seneca, the F-35 is supposed to be the egg-laying wool milk pig. It's many, many things. Hmm. On the other hand, Russia rolled out just out a 30 mil jet, the checkmate after like 2 years of teaming up with Turkey. Russia is very good at rolling out iterations of previous designs, which it dresses up as being new. They either have new airframes with the old innards, or the old innards, or they have old airframes with brand new innards, but they're usually iterative. And that's the way the Russians work. They don't make big orders. They don't try and make big leaps. And in many ways, the Chinese work on the same policy. It's actually quite sensible if you want to keep your industry going. But it does lead to logistical nightmares, which is why Western militaries often don't like it, especially when you have a large military. But here's the point. You have countries like Britain, France, and Germany and Italy, which don't have large militaries anymore. So could honestly probably run an iterative program quite well. And without too much issue, as long as they implemented standardization on the majority of components and ease of upgrade, i.e. open architecture was used. And if they could do that, they could probably find themselves with far more sustainable industries, because Britain would be a case of, oh, we're ordering another squadron of jets this year. Well, we can afford to order a squadron of jets this year, because, they'll take 2 years to build, so we can order a squadron every couple of years, or half a squadron every year, and it's, lovely. Yes, what I said about the F-15. Honestly, Melanie, that's what started off my F-35 rant. The F-15. Melanie 6, as Melanie 6 said, the F-15E was, for all intents and purposes, a completely new aircraft, just approved on funding and much easier to get if they called F-15. And I said, that's what started off the F-35 rant. That's the F-35 will probably be the last generation of fighter, because everyone from now on will be called F-35, whether they are anything to do with the F-35 or not. Hello, Dan. Thank you for being here. It's good to have a admin on the site, especially if the internet is going up and down. No, Scott. Well, didn't get hit on the head with a newspaper, so can confirm Sean Mack isn't here. Mm-hmm. Then I'm trying to roll up my iPad as I tend to read the news on that. Oh. Let's see. Now, here is the other thing that, of course, goes on in the 1890s. And this is one of my favorite discussion points and one of Drax's favorite discussion points, because here is the thing. Technically, the Rurik, produced by the Russians, is the justification the Royal Navy uses for building two powerful class. I have no idea in what world that justifies the building of that. And it's one of the interesting things, because the RN goes through several periods in its life when technology is moving pretty much quite fast. It doesn't think war is imminent, and so it keeps building a couple of this, a couple of that, a couple of this, a couple of that, and just testing out ideas, not really committing itself to anything. It does mean it ends up with a rather interesting looking navy, but here is the reality. The Royal Navy understands operating on the sea. They understand the world. So one of the things, and this is something Drac comes up with regularly, is in what world is it likely that one of the two of these is actually in the right part of the ocean to deal with the one of these if it turns up anywhere? Very low. Now, and I've had this discussion with Drac, so there's nothing he hasn't heard before. We all know the Battle of the River Plate is the model the British end up going with, because at that point they do realise, I think, wars are coming. So they're building packs of cruisers, which are pretty homogeneous even across different classes. And so they can descend on you with a half a dozen ships and tear you to pieces that way. But the thing is, in the 1890s, the Royal Navy's having to build an awfully large fleet, but it doesn't really know what it wants to build an awfully large fleet of. Because it's theoretically got the 2-power standard, and that's going to come in not that long after then. And it's theoretically got all these things going on where it's having to deal with, look at Russia, look at France, look at Germany, look at America, look at Italy. Doesn't really know where it's going to fight, who it's going to fight, how it's going to have to fight them. It does know that technology is changing a lot, that steam engines are coming in, that there is now power, there is now all sorts of things going on. The question becomes, are they really building the 2 powerful class vessels to counter the Rurik, or is the Rurik just a useful excuse to build a couple of powerfuls and test out? Because the thing is, if you build one ship, then that doesn't really teach you anything apart from that one ship. You have to build 2 to 3 at least to get some knowledge. And 2 is probably more viable than building 3 because it's going to cost you less money. But if we look again about the Royal Navy pre the Warrior class, they build a lot of 2s. And then after the Warrior class, they build a lot of 2s. Because it's technological change. It's not a very smart idea forever actually fighting a war. And it's something which I would suggest shows a massive amount of arrogance that you actually engage in it, because it's basically admitting that you don't think anyone's going to be fighting you, so there's no point you worrying about the requirements that anyone would actually have to face to fight a proper war. But it's also not necessarily as stupid as it might initially look. Because it is about testing out and developing your fleet. It's about what you can create as a viable force. And the thing is, if you had then turned around and gone, yep, the powerful class are what we need to fight the French armoured cruisers that they're building and the Russian armoured cruisers, you could have churned them out. They're expensive, but you could have churned them out. That's what the Royal Navy could do. They test them, they build them, they know about them. That's it. Okay, got the F-35 bit. Just the F-15 bit that led into it was missing the first time around. Sorry to hear that. Gatwong, hello! Okay, oh dear. Came in and immediately hit F-35. Well, I can only go up from that note. You'll certainly roll up your iPad. That's good. F-35 is okay. It was meant to be okay at a lot of things on a budget. It's okay at a lot of things. Limited budget idea kind of went out the window, though. Yep. This is the 1892 Rurik. The 1905 vintage Rurik is also an interesting piece. One of the designs for her came with 6 twin 10 turrets. Yeah. There are all sorts of options for the 1905 vintage Rurik. Albuzaski. Well, USA is a bit doing the same. The F-16 is now block how many? 17, 18? F-15, F-18 are also going the same route. There is not much more that can be done in plane from the frame design except a complete revolution. Pretty much. Definitely, wouldn't it be fair to say the RN isn't building to counter other nations, although they might be using that as an excuse, but instead they're trying to out the technology? Pretty much that's my view of the RN in the 1890s. And if you want a real example of that, just look at the ships designed. This thing wouldn't look out of place in World War One. You wouldn't want it in World War One, but it wouldn't look out of place in World War One. That looks like it's a relative of HMS Warrior. This looks like a very dangerous ship under anyone's language. This looks almost messy. Exactly joking. Honestly, it makes a lot of sense for testing this. It does. Animal 16365 were the 1860s to 1890s a nightmare for the Royal Navy due to the rapid developments in technology for warships and trying to figure out what needs due to the overseas holdings. Pretty much, it's a nightmare. What do you invest in? What do you build? And what do you build in quantity? These are complicated questions. Senator, what is the last time in history a ship at line was useful combatant with all the possible upgrades? I think there was one of them used in the Battle of Lisa, which did sort of interesting from memory. From memory, I'm not sure how useful it was. Oh. That's good. Do you trust the current Admiralty staff to be responsible for setting up the situations where the phrase "what happens if" is a reasonable one? Current one, yes. Previous couple, yes. Phil Jones, back to that level, probably all of those in the last run since him, yes, and him. Previous ones to him. No. For a while back. Carmen, I had a very busy 2 days in work. 130 visits to diversity. Welcome also. Thanks for another awesome build trumps. Glad it was good. Dylan Lolaire, the line drawing in the Power class really doesn't do them justice. The photos are amazing. Yeah. They are powerful looking ships. That's what they're supposed to be. They're intimidating as anything. Excuse me a second. Shh. What? Not sure. Don't know if my tea's arrived or not. I don't think it has arrived. I'll see. I'll get a knock on the door if it has. Should I be worried that the fluffy research assistant has moved closer to the door already, just in case my tea arrives? I think he thinks it's for him. It doesn't. No worse than what happened in World War II. When the P-40 was in British service, it went through 2 names, Tomahawk and Warhawk. The changes were that much. Run cash. I love this period of shipbuilding. No one seems to be able to agree on what a ship should look like. Yeah. Honestly, this looks more like some sort of royal yacht. Honestly, it does. This looks like it's been... if you put them next to each other, you would say, okay, so this is built by the Navy, which is planning on wiping out the world. And this is built by the Navy, which is planning on feeding the world to death. Darius Rosensky, rear areas of oil like the South America and the Indian Ocean. Let's see. Bum. Powerful class. Just checking their guns. Well, they have 9.2-inch guns, but they do only have 2 of them, and the rest are 6-inch guns, of which they have 12 of them, and 16 12-pounders, and 12 3-pounders, and 4 18-inch torpedo tubes. So, you never know. That could have been quite an interesting thing, but I'd say Indian Ocean before I would send them anywhere near the South America station, considering what turns up in the South America station. Don't take me this the wrong way, but you know, the South America station is pretty interesting in World War One. Maybe after the Battle of the Falkland Islands. I was asking, the same manner we're a bit stagnant when it comes to ship hull design. Zumwalt uses turtleback bow. That was in destroyers at the start of the 20th century. It was, yeah, but that's not a bad thing. Basically, bow shapes you're looking at are what are you using your ship for? What do you need in terms of ship hull volume? If you need a bigger hull volume, then you probably want the turtleback or the X-bow. I was asking, I'm still waiting for a successful catamaran trimaran multi-hull design despite LCS debacle. You'll probably be waiting a little bit while longer. That's good. The ship on the right looks like it was visited by a Second Amendment rights activist that happened to be also World War II USN refit designer. I'm not sure what. Calvin, what was the most important ship built in Pembroke Dock in this period? That would have to do a lot of study on. Because it's not just what is the biggest, most powerful ship built in Pembroke Dock, but what does it do and what's it achieve that could also mean it's important. So that would require a lot of study to answer that question, Carl. Then it's something about the high freeboard and the double stack guns. They look like if you asked for a barroom brawler in a ship form. Yeah, I would argue that. I agree with that. I can get that in the zone idea. Simulacra, can we talk about the Russian setting and Pacific Squadron and their epic design and appearance? They look lovely. They had issues. This squad, FRA is just trying to protect you in a strange place that's definitely not your territory and smells wrong. Yeah. I think I'll have to move his bed next to the door at some point, because I put his bed down there next to the radiator. Keep him warm, and he's spent the whole time sleeping between me and the door. He might move. Why do so many navies use 9.2-inch guns? Because they're useful. This is going to sound strange. A 10-inch gun, by the time you get to the size of a 10-inch gun, you have all the drawbacks of operating a 12-inch or bigger gun, i.e. a battleship grade or battle grade gun, but none of the benefits of a cruiser gun. And for 10-inch, for the weight difference, you might as well go for a 12-inch. But a 9.2-inch gun, you can achieve roughly the same rate of fire as you can with an 8-inch, but you have a far more powerful weapon. Jared Bonus, the issue is when aviation, especially carrier aviation, becomes too costly to expend aircraft and their crews. In the early days, when the alternative is a ship getting damaged losing more crew, was the aircraft loss successful? Yes. That was the point. In nice way, you could build an aircraft a lot quicker than you could a ship. You could train a pilot a lot quicker than you can train an aircrew. So it's not something you don't go out there wanting to lose people. At no point, I don't want to give anyone that idea you want to lose people. But if you have to choose between risking a ship or risking an aircraft, you risk the ship. You risk the aircraft. Jack Wright, hello, Jack. Was there much difficulty justifying new ship builds in late 1800s to whomever wrote the checks? It seems tech advancement and that speed and cost can be hard to justify to accounting. Yes, it was, which is why this apparently justifies the two of these. And you sit there and go, it doesn't. At no point does that justify two of these. Seriously, one of these could take out probably a dozen of those, sadly enough, for the Russians. So it's a case of what are they being built for? Well, they're being built to test out how big you can build a cruiser, basically. What you can do with it. And look, watching on my tablet while trying to work on my laptop. My FRA is rolling on my keyboard. Hello, Doctor. Off topic. How is the dog? He's doing well. Snoozing, but doing well. He's always he likes the snooze. He likes car journeys as well. Um, he basically take. It's quite interesting. My car, whenever I'm traveling with the dogs and on trips, and I've got the dog with me as company, one of the dogs with me as company, they get the whole back seat, and all the stuff goes in the boot, and everything stuff which can't go in the boot and doesn't fit there goes in the front passenger seat. It doesn't go. And then if anyone else gets sort of looks at your car, you turn up to someone, they go, "Ah, yeah, you're here to pick me up. Oh, you've got your dog with you. That's lovely." Open the front passenger seat and go, how am I supposed to fit in here? Wait a second, I'll move it. And the dog looks very perturbed that stuff being added to the back footwell. Oh. That's the case of, you don't put stuff here. You want a person wants to get in the car? Why? There's something. Well, they do. They do have dreadnoughts in South America, so those are the units they'd send after them. Anything lighter, it could give the flight a fight that could inflict some serious damage. Yes. Richard Order, based on looks alone, what ship would you place in a horror movie? Oh, good lord. You want something menacing, but ultimately you'd want it to be a giant lemon. Any of the first generation of German dreadnoughts, any of them would probably fit that requirement, honestly. Yeah, the first generation of German dreadnoughts, the first two classes pretty much. The ones in that weird six arrangement that look really powerful on paper, but aren't. Then the Admiralty receives a telegram and suddenly go, "Oh, do we have a squadron of pre-dreadnoughts down there? I've forgotten about them." That tends to be the RN's approach to, "Oh, we found some town crawls cruisers. What? We had some down there? We do. They're a squadron. They have a rear admiral. We have a rear admiral down there." There is honestly one anecdotal story about Fisher and Churchill in the early days in World War One in the Admiralty, and they're in there having a conversation, and Sturdy walks in, and they're talking about their dispositions around the world, and they're all discussing what to do to cover a certain area on the map, and I think it's the south of the Indian Ocean, and a captain walks in, and they're all discussing what to send there, and he goes, "My brother's down there." And they look at him like, "What do you mean your brother?" "My brother, Rear Admiral so-and-so, is down. My brother, the Rear Admiral's down there." "What do you mean he's down there?" "With his squadron of cruisers." And they also look at each other and go, "We have a squadron of cruisers down there?" "We do." It happens. Russian ships, like French ones, are made to look impressive, but have problems when engaged by a real warship. The Russian ones honestly had a problem in that they had to go that distance. And going to be engaged by a real warship, it's the nicest way. You sail those ships in that period around the world, and then you don't give them decent agents. Honestly, what he needed to do was have a big port like Singapore was by 1940, and actually have Singapore like it was in 1940 and have access to it and be able to take his entire fleet into there and basically refit them top to bottom, rest the crews, and restore, restock, and then launch it. The sheer issues, the sheer amount of issues and complexity he has. You have to remember the Second Pacific Squadron on their voyage. Think about it. Think about any other nation which has tried to attempted that in any way, shape, or form of similarity over distance. The next one after that is probably in the modern era, and this is after sailing ships, which is a slightly different operation. It's probably the Falklands War in 1982, and that's an awful logistics challenge. And that's when Britain is in, theoretically, at least the same sort of segment of the world, if not quite the same hemisphere, or section of the rather large Atlantic Ocean. The Powerful was a lot more seaworthy than the Rurik. John Owens, is that why there seems to have been a thought on return to 9.2-inch arm heavy cruiser emergency war build? Yes. Because honestly, the 9.2 would have been a huge improvement over the 8-inch. And it wouldn't have taken up that much more space. As I see, were those underwater torpedo tubes ever used successfully on cruise and battleships, or just serving as a weak spot and potentially a flooding point with untrained crew? I think they have tried to use them. I'm trying to think of one which has been successfully used on purpose. And I can't I'm sure they must have at some point, but I can't for life of me remember one of them. No. That's what, the RFA isn't upset that you're putting stuff in the back. He's upset that you're not putting the human and the stuff in the back with him in the front. No. You see, he can't lie down on the front seat. He can lie full length across the back. That's good. The Russian squadron also had the problem that it was crewed by people who saw the sea for the first time. At the same time, they saw their ships for the first time. That was an issue as well, yes. There's Rodsky. Yeah, the RN has to do many ships. So many ships they kept misplacing their ships and forgot they had them until they stepped on them and looked for the thing that was causing their foot discomfort. Not quite that bad, but as I said. And to be honest, this is one of my reasons for finding Sturdy slightly annoying, because Fisher and to an extent Churchill, you would expect to occasionally drop ships because they are covering procurement, strategy, all sorts of things. And wider parts of the world, they're going to forget where they are if they have ships in there because they're dealing with so many other things. Because also, literally, that isn't their job in that role. That is Sturdy's role. That is his job, to run the out-of-area operations and know where the ships are. If Sturdy doesn't know, then you have a problem. Mainly with Sturdy. I'm not sure what it is about the battle cruiser admirals in the Royal Navy in World War One, but honestly, I don't have time for many of them. Or any of them, really. Hood is about the only one I have time for, and he unfortunately dies. Gosh, would you take the Kamchatka into a major naval facility like 1940 Singapore? Can you imagine the carnage? I can imagine them probably just taking the cork out the bottom and going, yeah, it's dealt with. You never have to look at it again. I'm sorry, HMS Romney at Bismarck is an example dog. Yeah, it is. But I wouldn't really call that. That's more trying to finish her off in the end. Hello, Henry Cox. That's not really more a case of we've finished. We've given up shelling her because frankly, there's no point in it anymore. We've poked so many holes in here, we can't. That's not going to make us sink anymore. Let's try and break with our torpedoes. Andrew, is there a tendency to forget units a reason to have one of those big maps on the world with markers on it to show what is there? Pretty much, that is the entire reason for that. I have to admit, Stafford, I do keep looking at Toyota Hiluxes and thinking that perhaps I should end up getting one. But I have been told by various familial members that if I do get a Toyota Hilux, they will disown me. Who knows? I doubt they would. Right. I'm just going to put in some timings for this. Seeing as we seem to have reached a certain point, let's say that would be the 1890s, and 01 will be the 1900s. So, HMS Edinburgh and USS Chester. Now, as I said, technically, of course, this is HMS Duke of Edinburgh. Yeah? Previous Duke of Edinburgh. Cruiser. Big cruiser. Powerful cruiser. Not a yacht. Dukes of Edinburghs usually are big, powerful warships. Just dropping a hint here. Yacht named Duke of Edinburgh, no thank you. We call our royal yachts Britannia. You can make another one, call it Britannia, that's fine. If you want to call it something else, there's always Sovereign of the Seas, that's also fine. Duke of Edinburgh, Type 83. Seneca, what a good database system would have done for the Royal Navy. Yeah, it would have been interesting. It does got Russian squadron. Also, didn't help that the Battle of Tsushima, leading Russian ship mistook a Japanese screen ship for a Russian scout and signaled them about the rest of the 2nd Pacific Squadron following. Life happens. Andrew Cox, the battlecruisers were kind of like the cavalry of the fleet. So you got sail me closer so I can hit with my sword types of admiral. You certainly got something. Callum Gasman, a Blackburn Hilux? Not quite. Adfab. Battlecruiser admirals, glory prestige ships attracting similar people to an extent. To an extent. They never forgot to pay them their wages, Darius Radatsky. Cantorn, embrace your inner American and get more of an F-350 with a lift kit. It's not a Hilux. Yeah, but the trouble is with an F-350 is actually driving it down British roads. A Hilux will just about fit because they're designed for roads like Britain, because Japan and the British roads are not that dissimilar in terms of the winding country areas. When it comes to British one-lane roads, though, they're an interesting breed. Jeff, don't you mean more powerful cruiser? That thing will do a lot of damage to anyone. This is the point. HMS Duke of Edinburgh is a very powerful ship. Let's be honest, though. If you were USS Chester, you wouldn't want to actually, how do I put this politely, run into the Duke of Edinburgh. See, whilst Chester does have a top speed of 26 and a half knots on speed trial, but usually 24 knots, the Duke of Edinburgh has a top speed of 23 knots. So Chester's advantage over Edinburgh is only 1 knot, unless really, really good coal is being provided. Really, really good. We're talking top of the range anthracite coal. So the point here is, if you're thinking about it from this sort of perspective, if these two were in a, I don't know, Rodney Eisenhower scenario, that Porchester would never get away. It would take a long time to work up to full speed from practically a dead stop, with this thing already going at full speed hunting you down. And again, we will get into the Nelson and Rodneys, and I have done some analysis of that scenario. Thank you. Give me a second. No. No food. Not yet. They ordered it a while ago. I'm sure he'll get here at some point. Anyway. Oh, it's it. Ooh. Raleigh, calm down. Raleigh. Hello. Sorry. Took a while. I'm sure Chester could run into Duke of Edinburgh. That has a roundabout. I'm not sure that would survive first contact with Edinburgh. Uh-huh. But no, the thing is, this is a golden era of cruiser design in many respects in the 1900s, and it's all ignored because of the dreadnoughts. And that's a shame. Because honestly, the dreadnought saga and the dreadnought obsession feeds into the dreadnought obsession in the treaties and the capital ship obsession in the treaties. And that is why I argue that the treaties are worse for the British in many respects because of the limitations they place on cruisers. Because that's a heavy cruiser. 9.2-inch guns, 16,000 tons roughly. So that's what you need for a heavy cruiser. That's something which is a heavy cruiser. You know, if you were, and it would have changed the way we approached warfare completely. It would have made the fleets of the 1920s and 1930s far more suitable to World War II if they'd been able to build these larger, more powerful, and more versatile cruisers. It would have also meant things like the Deutschland class would have been absolutely moribund. Because if you're going out and you're saying, my ship is more powerful than anything else it can fight it, and the Royal Navy is going, yeah, we have a swarm of 9.2-inch armed cruisers which can all do 30 plus knots. Your ship is what? 11-inch guns? Yeah. Good luck. That's good. Up in Welsh mines, where else had good supplies of quality anthracite? Parts of northern Canada and America. And some parts of South America as well. Brazilians seem to occasionally get good quantities of it. Mm-hmm. Mitchell Oates, I have heard about that said about Ford. Come on, guys, read Cruiser Age. Oh yes, the SMS Admiral Spawn and her half sisters, the Novara side and Heckland. Good ships. And I know everyone's going to think I'm always eating when I'm on a live these days, but it seems to be the only point at which I'm actually sat down during a day is when I set time aside for a live, and then food arrives, and I'm sort of going, I haven't eaten all day, so apologies. Is that takeaway Yorkshire pudding? No, this is a takeaway Chinese, a chicken, something called a chicken ball in the UK. Don't ask. It's basically a chunk of chicken breast. We hope chicken breast in dough. Jones, the Deutschlands seem to have forgotten about Hood, Renown, and Repulse. That was the other issue. We can outrun things? Can you really outrun the Hood, Renown, and Repulse? To be honest, the Deutschland class couldn't outrun most of the Royal Navy. Secondary, was giving up Heligoland a good idea for Britain? Not really. It was probably sensible politically, but strategically it would have been great fun. It would have been a nightmare for every German government to deal with. And you could have armed it with heavily in place 15-inch guns and just gone, so, you're going to cause us trouble? That'd be a fun thing. At least it's not McNuggets, i.e. fake chicken. I tend to avoid McNuggets if I can. They don't taste the same they used to. Post-Dreadnought. Now, I enjoy these. I enjoy looking at the ships which come about, and the designs which come about in this sort of period, and the developments going on. Excuse me, dog's gone suspiciously quiet. We okay? Okay. Yes. He's fine. He's behaving. Um, there is so often, especially when I'm looking at some areas on the internet and some books in certain stores, I get the impression that people sort of treat the dreadnought as being either a stopping point or a starting point. And actually, it's a bookmark. That is what the dreadnought is. There has been tipping point coming for a long, long time. And the dreadnought is when it tipped finally that way. For big guns, for turbines, for all these things. But it doesn't mean it's tipped the whole way. It doesn't mean there's still not good ideas into producing triple expansion engines and later on quadruple expansion engines. These are all still viable systems to try and eke out every precious amount of power you can get. Oh gosh, I'm always surprised how slow the Deutschland class actually were. I'm not. I'm not. When you consider what Germany is dealing with and who's running Germany, who's running their navy at the time of the Deutschland class procurement, I am not surprised about anything about the Deutschland class. Okay. Just to make it clear. I mean, after World War II, Britain tried to sink Heligoland. Yeah, you might as well. Dev Squad. Deutschland forgot that all's well and good in having big guns, but not having armour to resist the 6-inch guns, which could fire them 3 times as fast, might have been a useful addition. Yes, but also you have to remember the 6-inch guns were improving at quite a tremendous rate at that point. And you have to work out, are you designing to deal with armour-piercing shells, semi-armour-piercing shells, or high-explosive shells? Because it's different. Andrew Gops, the strategy behind the Deutschlands was to build something for battleship guns that looked fast and impressive. That was fast and looked impressive. I have yet to find anything on a strategy where the ships could be used. Honestly, the Deutschland class, as I've covered with Radar, are not built for that. They're built because Germany needs something to try and keep their maritime industry going. And they're this sort of hybrid cruiser battleship which has the negatives of both and the benefits of neither. Origin. How did the Tennessee class armored cruisers compare to the British counterparts? 4 times 10-inch guns is nothing to sneeze at. No, they're more than capable vessels. I would argue the British ones tend to have slightly more reliable engines than the Americans because they're still getting their maritime industry off the standard when they're building them. And that's the thing, you have to. That's the other reason to do the iterative design and to keep building in pairs. Because you allow also your maritime industry to evolve with each pair, with each design. And you're pushing them a little bit further and a little bit further each time. It, in some sense, is basically the cottage industry version of engine design and infrastructure procurement, but it keeps it going and it keeps it improving at a rate that's affordable to everyone. No, trying to think. In World War Two, it would be the Channel Islands all over again, and that we've had it again, unless they had turned it into a landlocked dreadnought. That's pretty much what they would have turned it into. It would have been a nightmare. The Germans would probably have taken it, but they'd have lost a lot taking it. And that's the point. They'd have probably had to take it before they could take Norway or Denmark, and it would have given warning for that scenario. Anyway, what do you think of the Dutch 1930 battleship proposal? Would they have been useful ships and good designs? For the Dutch, they would have been useful ships, and they're fairly decent designs. The Dutch keep coming up with their designs later than everyone else. And they keep waiting to see what other good ideas and then sort of build their own. I think the problem for the Dutch there was they decided to choose German yards to build them. It's an interesting thing, but if they had gone with British yards, they would probably been far enough along and advanced enough that they actually would have been viable to get into service. And they might have actually been able to order them earlier, because the thing is, British yards had far more capacity. But they went with the German ones because they were trying to balance themselves by ordering those from Germany and other stuff from Britain to try and keep themselves level pegging between the two sort of naval armaments beasts dead in between. Panther Chief had excellent acceleration and a real chance to keep running away till the night, especially with a spotter plane, but when those broke down, engine worn out, hull fouled, and even several shells did not explode after hitting H effector, and there was radar too. There were all sorts of issues. Dan Premium, triple expansion engines versus turbines. Looks at design for an octuple expansion engine. Looks at the simplicity of the turbine. I don't think anyone actually ever built the octuple expansion engine, but they did build the quadruple, and that was complicated enough. Kendrick Cox, turbines and gas turbines are wonderful if you want a powerful, compact power plant. If you want efficiency, you want reciprocating engines. Yes. That's good. The irony that the Deutschland class would have been more useful for the Royal Navy as a convoy escort than they were for the Kriegsmarine as commerce raiders always amuses me. It's true, though. They would be. It would have been far more useful for the Royal Navy. Far, far more useful. Coming elsewhere. Rebuilding ones or pairs, and then an iteration of those for some South African American country, then the next version for Canada, and show must go on. True. So this is what you get, but you also get occasionally a real race. Now, here is the interesting thing. We talk about the Anglo-German naval race, and everyone talks about it being dreadnoughts. Now, as you know, I've done a whole series where I've basically tried to dispel that as a myth. There isn't an Anglo-German naval race in dreadnoughts. It might be in terms of numbers produced, but the Germans never really have much of a standing on that one. It's more of a load of hyperbole from the Germans forcing the British to react and keep building, and the trouble is the Germans can never keep up. But technologically wise, the race is between the British, the Italians, and the Americans. There is one area, though, where there really is an Anglo-German naval race, and that is the four stackers. Because when it comes to ocean liners, there really is a bit of a race going on between the British and the Germans to see who can build the best, the fastest, and the biggest. So there you go. The real face of Anglo-German competition, the ocean liner. Hmm. Kaltura Kia. Andrew Cox, I'd have to disagree here. For the same money, reciprocating engines are efficient for any amount of money. Turbines are far more thermodynamically efficient. This is especially true for modern systems in which they can actually marine cogen plants. To an extent. Matthew Malecki. I always wondered what the Deutschland class would look like with a new 24 centimeter gun that was built on their pre-dreadnought types. Um, hmm. It could have been interesting. It certainly could have been interesting. Dan prefer to re-ocean liners prefer to think of them as pre-commissioning armed merchant cruisers. I'm thinking of what they like, but the trouble, what they are, is the real race area. (1910). Naval. Now, of course, this got divided up because of World War One, which comes in nicely at the sort of the halfway point. But I started off by talking about the French and the Chinese navies, and really the disappointment of them, because they start out with a lot of promise, but they don't have a lot of substance. And there's been some interesting ideas come back on them. One of the ones that comes back most is that, post World War One, the French have lost so much that they can't be bothered. They don't see that they don't want a fleet. And the trouble is, if that's the case, they should have retreated from Empire. If you can't be bothered, the trouble is, when you don't do things properly, you're setting yourself up to fail. And that's going to cost you a lot more lives. Your option, if you don't want to do it, you shouldn't do it. If you don't want to defend it or do it properly, you shouldn't do it. Is basically the best option, because you either do it or you don't do it. You don't do it badly. If you do it badly, you set yourself up for what happens in World War II. And I would argue that's what happens in World War II. The legacy of the French from World War One to World War II means they don't do things well. And you can see that in a lot of what happens around the world. They aren't defended. They aren't secured. And I would also argue, to an extent, the British are just as guilty in terms of some of their preparations for Far East War, etc., because they completely underestimated the pace of modern conflict when it came to the Far East. To be fair, everyone does. Even the Japanese are running out of food when they're launching their attacks. But the thing is, if you're going to be fighting a defensive war, if you know your plan is to hold until the fleet turns up, you actually should build some positions to hold. And there was a very interesting map going around on Twitter the other day, which is a 3D topography of Malaya. And you sit there and look at it and go, you can hold a lot of that quite easily. You should be able to hold Malaya. The Doopy de Loom submarine comes later, Seneca Nero. Cameron Gansford. Read turbines versus diesel, however. I was quite about the Type 45 gas turbine diesel drive. Yeah. My dad would like a word with the people who cut that, who decided to be smart on that and save money. Unfortunately, he's dead, but he would have said, probably would have crowed, "I told you so," quite loudly. Counter, just to build on that, we teach our students to expect 70% energy conversion reciprocating systems. We students expect 85 to 90% in post-process turbine installation. Andrew Cox, if you want an efficient turbine, you add intercooling and reciprocation and lose simplicity, but you are still fighting against the fact that the Brayton cycle is less efficient than diesel. That's God. Gas turbine engines are good for burst power, but they down fuel like Carl Lewis down steroids. These engines are good for cruising speeds over long distances because they're much more efficient. You need both. In the nicest way, especially in modern warships, you need both. What you should always do, though, is you should build your system with maintenance in mind. I.e., build a power plant setup. So let's say you have a pair of diesel engines and a gas turbine in each of your power packs. And then have 3 of these power packs distributed throughout the hull to power things. Have it set up so that one power pack can keep the ship operating. 2 power packs can provide all you need for operations and a bit of extra. And your 3rd power pack is your redundancy if something goes wrong or you need to perform maintenance on the power pack and you need to shut one down. Then you'll be amazed at how much more efficient things would get. But what you instead get is people going, "This will save money. We don't need this. We don't need another power pack. We don't need a 3rd aircraft carrier. We're always going to be able to decide when we can shut down systems to maintain them." Look at these design specs. They know what they're talking about. Counter. There's an interesting debate going on about engines in here. Good boy. Good boy. That's good. I remember watching a show about a Royal Navy destroyer in the Caribbean doing drugs patrol. They came across a cigarette boat smuggling drugs that redlined all 5 outboards. Probably found itself being hunted down by a lynx which just went, "So, you redlined all your outboards. Well, I can go faster than you." Andrew Cox, I actually worked on the design of the WR-21 back in the 90s when they were working up the concept. The original spec and concept made sense. I know, my dad was involved in that as well, so you might have met him. Or met people who met him. Systems do seem to go offline at the most convenient times. They do. In this case, of course, for the Yingri, the Shao Hull class cruiser, protected cruiser, the whole country goes offline at most inconvenient times. The point I often find interesting is that China pretty much what happens is that they have one government which is trying to build up a navy and all sorts of things. and then they fall and replaced by another government which is far more internally focused, and go, no, no, we don't need a navy. If they had started building their navy in the 1910s, 20 years later, especially with the way they're building the navy, they could have had quite an efficient, quite an capable navy. Probably not the size of the Japanese, but not small either. And it might well have been the case for the Japanese that, hang on, we go to war with the Chinese, we invade them, we're going to lose ships. We're going to lose something. But what was interesting about this one was both these ships, and the reason I grouped them together, they're both experimental. This one has a range of systems. It's all three ships. Two of them built in the UK in different yards. One is built in America. That one was eventually sold to the Greeks. And they're all built to slightly different specs and slightly different capabilities. Whilst they're sort of the same sort of design and shape, so broadly speaking, supposedly sister ships, but they all got slightly different engines, slightly different this, that, in order to test out and test systems so they can build a proper fleet. They're basically test beds for crew training, test beds for what systems work best for China, test beds for what guns work best for China. They are a brilliant idea, a brilliant investment for a navy. And they're doing the exactly right thing. They're starting off with cruisers, which are big enough you can have a large crew built around a small cadre of very knowledgeable people. So it's not like a destroyer where everyone has to be knowledgeable, or a battleship which is incredibly complicated, so you need a lot of knowledgeable people and a lot of mass. A cruiser is the balance in between, and you can build your fleet from there. The Amphitrite class and the Rick, they are the French pushing forward their submarine design. That probably was the Manchester series, because that's what goes on to say. The Iron Destroyer had the Olympus turbines ready to go and gave chase. They were catching the cigarette boat that started during the drugs, dumping the drugs, and when the destroyer gave the order to stop and fired a warning shot from the deck gun. Ouch. In real life, the Japanese played the Chinese like a cat plays with a mouse. In real life, the Japanese keep playing with making sure that those various warring factions are fighting each other internally. They are very keen on supporting it. A similar model that various other countries use to this day when watching on their neighbours and causing their neighbours trouble. It's real politic. You don't care what they might do to their country, just as long as they destabilise the government so you don't have to deal with that threat. It's like a lot of countries are currently happy with Afghanistan because they think they supported the Taliban because it was a helpful way of embarrassing America and getting more influence in the area. But there is an old saying: be careful feeding the tiger, because someday it might decide you're better as its dinner. That's right. Germans, which non-dreadnought powers have been able to afford them? Pretty much everyone could afford cruisers, especially ones, because it's such a spectrum of cruisers. What you're building as a cruiser is what you build as a cruiser can be very different from what I built as a cruiser. And let's be honest, the Royal Navy built the powerful class at the same time as the Russians built the Rurik. Powerful class is a lot bigger, a lot more powerful, but both are still called cruisers. Considering the various arms races going on, I'm always surprised the South Americans didn't spend more time on cruisers. Oh, good luck with that, Stafford. Thanks for coming in when you get so busy. That's good. When the sea in front of you explodes, it tends to focus the mind as to whether you should really keep running from the big warship that's gaining on you when you're trying to run as fast as you can. It does tend to. Thank you for that, Squad. Dan Freeman. I think the tiger is the animal associated with the West in Chinese mythology. Ironic, given your statement. Always be careful. So, World War One. Now, the main thing I had that I took from talking about this and this video is the amount of you who are obsessed with Dupuy de Lome as a name, and the ones who come back to me and go, sloops? What were they for? What sloops are a very interesting scenario. So we're going to deal a lot of time on sloops. So I'm going to start with submarines. Why are the French building submarines in World War One? Is it to fight the Mediterranean? To an extent. As I think Carl Magazza pointed out, they were far more useful to long-range submarines for the Austrians than for the French. As honestly, the French didn't need such big submarines for going into the Adriatic. The Austrians did need big submarines for going out of the Adriatic into the Mediterranean. But, and I would add this in all seriousness, the French are also thinking about what they can do to assist the British in the North Sea. And you have to remember, submarines are used to back up they're used to an extent to back up the channel defences, but also to back up the intelligence gathering capacities of the British intelligence system. So, yes, there are listening stations all up and down the UK listening for German signals, and thankfully they are chat boxes and tell us everything they're going to do. But there are also submarines being used for it. There are submarines positioned off ports watching and trying to spot what's going on and trying to see what's going on. It's one of those interesting things. When you start talking to people all along, they go, they're running a distant blockade. Yes, they're all along my way. And you think, yes, they're right, but there is one similarity between close blockades and distant blockade. You need a form of inshore squadron keeping an eye on what the opponent's doing. It's just that by World War One, the inshore squadron is your submarines. Thank you, Stafford. Recruisers. And then we had the cruisers ranging from 1,500 to 2,000 ton torpedo cruisers to 12,000 to 16,000 ton armor cruisers. Don't get me started on the Austro-Hungarian armor cruisers. They are a bit of my pet. Why? You managed to muck them up quite heavily with skill. I have no idea what this is. I have no idea. You see, this is the problem. When I don't order the Chinese myself, but my family decides to order it for me, you get all sorts of... I think that's a mini spring roll. True. I think their attempt to get in vegetables in me is disgusting. Oh, good. There's some Hong Kong style chicken there for later. Oh, well. I don't mind proper sized spring rolls, but mini spring rolls. So, Nick, would a fleet of Dupuy de Lome class, of all three Dupuy de Lome classes, be a useful fleet? No, it would be a fleet of lemons. No, I'm not sure actually. The electronic warfare ship could be very useful, but it couldn't do anything. You'd have all the information in the world, but you wouldn't be able to do anything with them. Alfred B228. I might be completely wrong, but I've always thought that the Olympia design was ahead of her time. It was made me sad to see later USS cruisers sort of walk that back. You're right, and yes, it is sad. And now on to the question that comes up with most of sloops. Because whenever I talk about sloops, I tend to mention that it's my annoyances that the Royal Navy doesn't build more. So, here is our starting. And by the way, that's HMS Shoreham, which is one of the ships that the Royal Navy is building in 1930, which are sloops. Now, this is Article 8 of the 1930 London Treaty. Subject to any special agreements, which may be submitted to limitation, the following vessels are exempt from limitation. 1. Naval service combatant vessels of 600 tons, that's all 600-ton metric tons, I'm placing under. Naval surface combatant vessels exceeding 600 tons, but not exceeding 2,000 tons, sound displacement, provided they have none of the following characteristics. They mount a gun above 6.1 inch, mount more than 4 guns above 3 inch, are designed or fitted to launch torpedoes, are designed for a speed greater than 20 knots. Naval surface vessels not specifically built as fighting ships which are employed on fleet duties or as troop transports or in some other way than as fighting ships, provided they have none of the following characteristics. Mount a gun above 6.1 inch, mount more than 4 guns above 3 inch, are designed or fitted to launch torpedoes, are designed for a speed greater than 20 knots, are protected by armor plate, are designed or fitted to launch mines, are fitted to receive aircraft on board from the air, mount more than 1 aircraft launching apparatus on the centerline or 2 on one on each broadside. If fitted with any means of launching aircraft in the air, are designed to operate at sea more than 3 aircraft. You could build as many as you freaking liked. So here is the thing. Here is the point. And I'm not making this from nowhere. There are actual naval officers. There are actual documents. There are actual people pushing this case. This is why this class is built and why this one evolves through a couple other classes into the Black Swan class. They are being built because the Royal Navy realizes it needs long-range convoy escorts, and they need to be new sort of ships. If it can go 20 knots, that covers most merchant ships and is going to look after most convoys. A 6.1 inch gun, that's lovely, but honestly, you could have had 4 4.5 inch guns or 4.7 inch guns, i.e. destroyers. You could take 2 of the double mounts which the tribal class have, the 4.7s, or you could have actually put some money into the 4.5s, and you could have had double 4.5s fore and aft, and space for everything else. There are all sorts of options. They're not supposed to take torpedo launchers. They're not supposed to design or fit one, and a speed greater than 20 knots. But they can carry as many 3-inch guns as they want, or below. They just can't. So you can carry a load of pom-poms, you can carry a load of 4.5s, or anything up to 6-inch if you really fancy. The thing is, you can build a very capable convoy escort from that. And as someone else has pointed out, a navy which actually designs cruisers that magically have space for perfect extra armor and which use water as part of their bulge protection and does all the other things the Royal Navy's creative licensing does, could have really worked with that. And they don't. And the only reason is because of cost. And there are actually sort of options. The Royal Navy at one point is thinking, we can build a flotilla or a flotilla and a half. They actually end up ordering sort of roughly 12 of these, and we could get Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India to build 24 between them. And the thing is, that was being looked at as a policy of actually increasing and working through their yards, of actually developing their maritime infrastructure. And think about it. If you do start that in 1913, you've got them building a few of these every year. Then in 1937, when the treaties broke down, you can order destroyers from them. And their yards will be ready to build destroyers. And you'll also have a whole load of sloops available for convoy escorts, which will be force multipliers for the existing destroyers you have. And there'll also be far more yards available in those other nations to convert the old destroyers into the various generations of escort you need and maintain a border. It's a really sensible policy. So, of course, no government fricking did it. At all. Dirt Scott, chickens eat vegetables, therefore made of vegetables. By eating chicken, you're eating vegetables. I will accept that one. There again, I count chocolate as a vegetable. Anok, what are they using for fuel for the boilers for that steam-powered sub? Thankfully not coal. Oil. Yes. That's Scott. If a sloop can drop depth charges, how difficult will it be to convert it to drop mines? Not that difficult at all. You can fit it to do depth charges if you buy nice sort of rails and just say you're dropping very large depth charges and then design a mine to fit that rail. Jonas, so the British assumedly designed this clause and then don't exploit it. Pretty much. The British ensure this clause exists in various forms and slowly develops from about the 1920s to the every single generation of a treaty has something. Either completely ignores them, so therefore doesn't affect them in any way, shape, or form, or when it does talk about them, gives them so much freedom, you could do this, and they don't. And the British would turn around and say, well, this is how we can order the Flower-class corvettes, but still claim we're keeping to the treaties in 1939. And it's true, they can, but they're just taking advantage of it too fricking late. So no, what if there was a typo in the treaty and sloops could have 61-inch guns? If a sloop could have a 61-inch gun, they would have managed to magically build it. It would have been a shit armed with a mortar, because the only way you could build a 61-inch caliber gun would be a mortar. But it would be a very interesting vessel. It's only a little over 5 feet. They don't build the suits because of cost. As you say, that makes sense. So this was seen as just a political argument. Party versus party, or the wrong lord backing the idea. Honestly, the both political parties, Labour and Conservatives, both don't build them because honestly, they don't want to. They think if they build them in the UK, that's money that they can save from the budget. They have to build the high cruisers. They have to build the aircraft carriers. They have to build the big ticket items because if they don't, they'll be slammed. But they can skip on the sloops because no one will notice sloops. It's basically it's if you consider modern hospitals, right, and modern health procurement, the IT systems always a big always a big ticket item. The so that gets funded. Nurses and doctors, big ticket items, they get funded. Actually building hospitals, big ticket items. Number of hospital beds, all this sort of stuff. Air breathing things, all these things. Has anyone ever noticed how things like walking frames and those walking sticks which they give out in hospital, those sort of things, they're very basic things. They always seem to be short of. And their design hasn't really changed. Yes, they're very functional, the design. You have to admit it's a very good functioning design. But no one's really invested in it or thought about it too much. Now it works, and they never build enough. Well, basically that's like sloops, because they're something which is very functional, very useful, but no one talks about them because they're not sexy. I think they're beautiful looking ships because they're so functional, they're so capable, but they're not sexy. So no one wants to build them because it's a cost they can get away with not spending. And also, it would be a combination they have to have the Commonwealth countries and go, the dominions, and go, you're going to have to do some spending on these things and build them. But I think it would be in a case they could have won. And I think, honestly, if they had won this, the difference in Canada and Australia and their preparedness for World War II would have been massive. India could have had a force of sloops. South Africa could have had a force of sloops. New Zealand could have had a force of sloops. They could all have been building their own sloops, which would have been a good training for their officers. They've already got their officers and crew personnel going through training with the Royal Navy in the wider cadre, so they don't need to have a training sort of fleet. This would be their own fleet they could sort of build up, and that'd be very helpful for convoy escorts. Good luck, Roland Cash. Take care. Peter Dawson, a depth charge is £500. A sea mine, £2,000 roughly. Also different shape, because depth charges are small, can get several per mine. I agree, Peter. But you could design let's say you could design a £1,000 depth charge, a new supersized depth charge, you call it, and you could probably make a £1,000 mine. Or at least one which could fit a £1,000 mine's rail, especially if the rail was strong enough to take the £2,000 mine. Scott, given the 10-year rule, then thinking no war until 1942, is lack of sloops a case of can be built later rather than they don't need it? Yes, but it's relying on the speed of construction later. This is my problem with it. It's all based on jam tomorrow. Oh yeah, the industry will be there. We can mass produce sloops when we need them. We can mass produce sloops when we need them. When these ships are very useful, they could have built them. And if they built them from 1930 onwards, they would have been less than 10 years old by the time World War II began, and they would have been still very, very useful and very capable. The reason we can say that is there are sloops built in the 1920s which served the right way through World War II and are incredibly useful the whole way through World War II. It comes back to they are simple and basic enough, they're not going to go out of date anytime soon argument. Anuk, bandages or PPE using the hospital analogy. True. That's good. So have a couple of depth charges rails to the rear, can drop depth charges individually or together. Mines designed for depth charges, of course. Definitely just coincidence. There are options. Let's put it this way. Peter is quite right in terms of there are distinctions, but there are ways to get round those distinctions if you're prepared to be creative. Hello, Frank Spillardo. 0206, 1920s. Now, Nelson and the turbine-class Esperaro. One interesting people did point out was the number of the Esperaro's sisters which got sunk by swordfish. They did. Let's be honest, swordfish were fairly efficient ship-killing systems. This is what's often forgotten about them. They were efficient the whole way through the war, quite capable of killing ships, especially if they were attacking at night, when they were very stable and very capable of getting their targets. That's good. So more of a case of it gets to mid-September 1939, leadership goes, oh bugger, later was yesterday. Well, that's the thing. They do order the flag. The flag class, as I pointed out before, were started being specified in 1938. Well, really 1937, 38. They're sort of working on the idea of what they're going to be and what they're going to do based on sloop developments in the interwar period and stuff they've worked on already. Then the orders are issued in January 1939. Construction started in July 1939. The trouble was, really, they needed to have started about a year or two earlier than that. So, yeah, later was last year. Richard, what overlooked composite in World War II could have revolutionized naval aviation? There are various options, but honestly, nothing gets overlooked. There are things which don't get used as much as you would expect them to be used, but usually that depends on the supply and the viability of them through the war. And there are lots of things which come into really good use post-World War II. And you sit there and go, yeah, why do you come from it? And basically, it's getting the sustainable supply during the war. The isn't it so much the depth charge rails as a really solid mounting that just happens to work for the same universal fit as the depth charge rail, torpedo launchers and minelaying gear? Well, that's the other thing. The Royal Navy with the sloops, they tend to be fitted to be able to be used both as they tend to be fitted to work as mine sweepers as well as dropping depth charges, etc. So they have a lot of fittings already built in their design that can be adapted. And some of the stuff you use for mine clearance work in the 1930s and early 1940s is not that different to the stuff you use for mine deployment work. Hello, Night Heron Productions. Enjoying the talk so far. How feasible would the Admiralty subsidising the building of cargo ships designed for easy conversion to escort carriers be? Was the doctrine in place for that in the 30s? Yes, the Royal Navy was actually looking at its own oilers as conversion to escort carriers in the 1930s. That was some of Admiral Henderson's plans. So, I'm not sure why the light looks so weird on my cheek. But that was part of it. The Royal Navy was looking at looking at them and looking at the idea of escort carriers. It's part of their various functions. It's just when war happens, they don't. And they don't because those oilers are largely converted into various forms of amphibious shipping for things like Madagascar, etc. Right, so Nelson. Now, here is the thing with Nelson, and it caused some interesting discussions, in that most people are going, well, why don't you like it? So, the argument used for this firing arrangement is thus. that by having B as the raised gun rather than C, you could have a slightly better arrangement of the magazine area, which meant you had a much shorter, you had a slightly shorter, not that much shorter, really, overall things, um, armor belt needed to cover the area. And that's all true. That is the argument. It's a terrible argument. It's an absolutely atrocious argument because it's very much a technical engineering argument and it's not a practical operational argument. And the point is, yes, the question is, are you building these ships to be engineeringly great or are you building these ships to fight a battle? Are you building these ships for actual war or are you building them because they're beautiful feats of engineering? That's always my argument whenever I'm talking this through with people. And it's quite interesting sometimes being the historian in the room when these discussions are happening around you and you're having them with designers, etc. Because the Navy and to an extent all navies and politicians and various people get attacked by shiny. It's great. This is the engineeringly best solution. You hear the engineer, the naval architect, and they're giving this thing and they're talking it through, and this will allow this more efficiently, and this and this and this, and he's going, that's a marvelous, and we're all very impressed by the engineering, especially all the engineering naval officers are very impressed. And I work a lot, and you can see that. You turn around and go something like, so how's that going to affect operational capability? Well, we position it will have no real impact. Well, here you go. Here's a real impact of this one. You cannot use C turret to engage forward. You can't. You can theoretically, and there are tales of the guns being fired, but when they were fired, it ruined B turret. And it also caused reverberation back on C, and it all pretty much during testing took out both turrets when they fired their own guns. So, in the nicest way, and by that point it was too late to change things, in the nicest way, this is a lovely engineering solution. It produces the perfect scenario because it shortens your belt and allows you to therefore have a thicker belt over a smaller area. Wonderful. But I counter that. A longer ship would have had a greater length to beam ratio. A greater length to beam ratio would have made them a more efficient hull, especially with some design placing, which would have probably given them 2 knots greater speed. Yes, they might have had slightly less thick armor belt. I agree, but they would have been able to fire all 3 turrets forward. So they would have been both 2 knots faster, and they would have had a forward firing capacity of 9 16-inch guns when they're in the narrowest profile. So, yes, they would have had slightly thinner armor. For that, they would have been faster and would have been far more lethal with their actual weaponry. This might be controversial, but I'd say that's not really something I would question. I would just have done it that way. Kaltarg, if you ask us engineers, you may not like the answer of elegant versus effective, lol. The elegant solution. Every time I hear an engineer proposing an elegant solution, I know I'm either going to be blown away by how amazing it is, or I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes making the poor person very, very upset by pointing out how a very elegant engineering solution is operationally nonsensical. I was asking, how difficult would it be to design sloops so that you can slap additional guns and torpedo launch deck? Not that difficult. Sure. Following up to the last one, what composite would you have personally pushed for finding or creating a steady supply of? Hmm. There are a couple of materials which make the 4.5-inch gun system as was fitted on the Daring destroyer class destroyers post World War II viable, which would have probably been incredibly useful to have had earlier and in quantity prior to World War II, as they might well have got the 4.5-inch guns working before even the Travel class destroyers. And that could really change things because if you have non-penetrating double 4.5s and you can fit them all over the place, then in the nicest way your C class gets converted very quickly, probably your D class cruisers as well. Your destroyers become very different and far more effective and have a far more useful general purpose armament which can deal with aircraft far better. And you change the overall dynamics of the force because if you think about it, yes, the technology that comes in would have made really useful and would have made more useful, but you would have been starting from the base point of having the technology to make use of that technology. I.e., when radar comes in, you would have had a gun system which was viable to use it, really. Emma, why not successive superfiring turrets like the Atlantis? Weight and metacentric height. It would have been interesting. It would have been interesting to have done that, but no, they decided height. They decided weight was too much. And displacement, no. Andrew Cox, I thought the length of the rods was chosen for maximum wave drag, minimum wave drag. Yeah, but you can play around with that length a little bit. We're talking another dozen or so feet. It's a pleasure, Stafford. And as Dan Freeman says, the turrets do weigh about 1,600 tons. That does have an impact on your ship. And its metacentric height. Andrew, I think the turrets also come down to what you were talking about with politicians thinking in terms of Trafalgar-style lives of battles. If you only think of broadside, fire to design is invincible. That is true. It is very true, but you're designing an all-in-front gun ship. And that's the point at which I find it really absurd. If you were designing... See, the thing is, if you're designing a ship which has a turret out the back, well, that's fine. That makes sense. B, super firing. And C's out the back. If... Well, it's X by that point, or Y. If you're designing a ship which is going to be all in front... The French have the right way. They do have 2 quad turrets. That's the other thing. Imagine if they'd gone with 2 quad 16-inch turrets. That could have been interesting. Or even better, you know. 2 quad 16-inch turrets. Ooh. Might have had a decent working quad turret design by the time World War II rolled around for the King George V. Right, so did the British use the water armor system that made Admiral King mad on Nelson's? Yes. Calvin Gasberg. Read Nelson Narrow Regiment. To pull your leg, the World of Warships model does fire in frontal assault tactical situations with a tad of zigzagging and even in tail chase. Paul Bestwick, would the Nelsons be better with triple 15-inch guns? The triple 15-inch guns is often used as a design for them when they're considering building the F3, which is the battlecruiser variant. The trouble is they very early on get obsessed with the idea of building a 16-inch battleship, and that's what they're building. You could have built a 16-inch battlecruiser. You could have. And you would have probably built a longer hull at that point as well, and would have gone for the super firing sea turret. 15-inch guns makes more sense to me from a British perspective because, honestly, then we standardise on 15-inch guns. At which point, you probably have King George V's are 15-inch guns as well, because the British will then have an all-bet 15-inch fleet. And that would have made a lot more sense. A lot more sense. But not to be. So, 1930s. And here is what's come up. And I think it's the one that's come out today, from memory. It's Ark Royal and Enterprise. Or Yorktown class. And I love these designs. I love them for several reasons. One of the things I love most about them is their similarities. They have differences, they have their own individual quirks, and there is nothing wrong with that because that makes them suit their own nation's strategic needs. It's my constant thing when I'm going on to people I'm telling us about is, you have that. And there is nothing wrong with it. In that, the Royal Navy need for a carrier for a Royal Navy is very different than the need for the Americans. Good boy. Good boy. I know. Good boy. You got him, Papa. The Royal Navy's need for a carrier and a strike carrier is, yes, it's their strike carrier and it's their big fleet strike carrier, but it's still got to be able to operate in the Mediterranean. And it's got to be survivable if it's operating the other side of the world from Britain. So they build it like they do. The Americans are thinking very much in, we can build more if we need more, but also, we want a big alpha strike. And we've got a huge amount of space to maneuver in. And so let the space be our armor. And that's the thing. If you're operating in the Pacific, you can let space be your armor. It's very difficult to find you in the Pacific. The Mediterranean is not so difficult. The South China Sea is not so difficult as the Pacific. It's not particularly easy. The Southeast Asian islands, that's again slightly more easy to find you. So these are issues. What's the Nelsons? Okay. Nelson and Rodney are the two battleships which the Royal Navy builds in the 1920s as a result of the treaties. Everyone else gets to build 16 is building 16-inch battleships already. The Royal Navy makes a big fuss at the Washington Treaty, and as a result, they get allowed to build 2 more battleships. So pretty much Nelson and Rodney are the 2 most modern battleships in the world until the mid to late 1930s, when everyone else starts building new ships. Up until that point, these are the sort of queens of the seas. And they're the Royal Navy's 16-inch battleships. They're armed with 9 16-inch guns in 3 treble turrets. The A and C turrets are on the deck level. B turret is super firing over A turret. And they are interesting ships, let's say this. They're not as fast as they need to be. Scott, would the UK have been able to argue for 3 15-inch armed ships into Nelson class and build an upgraded Admiral class design? If they managed to argue for 3 15-inch ships, they might have built not so much an upgraded Admiral class design. They might have done that. Depends how much tonnage they get for it. If they get the same tonnage as they get for the Nelsons, and they get 3 of them, then they probably would go with something of the Nelson F3 type. But that's the reality. Maybe if they said they needed to replace HMS Tiger as well because of the damage she sustained during World War II, and they needed to therefore maintain parity. But honestly, the Royal Navy should have been allowed 12 battleships and 6 battle cruisers. Basically, the Royal Navy and US Navy both kind of get shafted in terms of capital ship numbers. And same with the Japanese Navy. If it's 10, 10, 7, it should have been 20, 20, and 14 allowed. Good boy. I know. Other doggies wolfing. Good boy, though. As Andrew Cox put out, KGVs were 14-inch for politics. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't, but in the nicest way, it's very difficult. It's easy to jump down from 16 to 14 and go, we are setting the standard. Jumping from 14 to 15, though, people would look at you and go, why are you doing this? It's pointless. So they would have still been 15, which would have been interesting. Here it is, 1930s. You've missed the 1930 show. It's just come out today. This is the thing. I'm going to jump ahead, and I'm going to probably do the 3 variants which are sort of have come out today, are coming out as well. Tobias Geoffrey, I still don't get Nelson's turret layout. That's what I love them. They're very pretty. Thank you. They are pretty in their own way. I don't agree with their layout, but that's what they're done. Next one, was it like a Queen Anne's mansion on the inside? Any internal designs, pictures to see? I haven't found any really decent internal pictures yet. I am always hunting for them. And I have a feeling my next visit to Dockyard Archives might reveal that, because I've just been saying that during COVID, or possibly as a result of COVID, they've had some more picture books handed in from that people kept. So maybe they'll have them in. Next one. If the RN had to form another line battle, where would Nelson's fit into it, and the R's and the Warspites? The Queen Elizabeth and the R's. Well, the Queen Elizabeth would be going slow, but the R's and basically the 13.5 ships, the R's and the Rodney and Nelson and Rodney would form the sort of steady squadron. You probably have the Queen Elizabeths at the head, especially after they've been upgraded. And then you have the 3 battle cruisers, maybe with HMS Tiger, depending on the period, going off and forming a sort of fast squadron. Nighttime Production. Watch the Nelson edition of the other day. You said Hood's armor scheme was that of the QE tiles previously. Was that the same amount of armor, or just overall spread of thin? Basically, the Hood's armor scheme was, to an extent, a hybrid of the Queen Elizabeth class and the R class. And it's, broadly speaking, it's all pretty much all over. A little bit thinner in certain places, but pretty much all over. So, yeah, she's basically got the previous generation's battleships armor scheme. Pretty much. Steph Thompson, are you armored versus unarmored? I can't help but think they could have been able to save Bonham Richard if her well deck had been, if they'd been armored and they flooded it in the beginning. I don't think you can save the Bonham Richard in any sense, really. Carl goes with re 15-inch Nelrons, KGVs. The Nelrons might have been 1545 and the KGVs even 1550. Quite possibly. And the odds are, in the nicest way, if you're upgrading as you're going, the Queen Elizabeth would have been upgraded probably to 1550s or at least 1545s. And ours, if the Nelrods are made 1545s, the odds are the Queen Elizabeths and the R's get upgraded to 1545s during the interwar years. And if the KGVs are 1550s, you could definitely probably at least upgrade the Nelrods to it. Do you have a favourite camo scheme for Nelson Glass? Not on me, but I do have some very cool books at home which have all their pictures and their camos. John Evans, Nightingale Fractions. Uttle armor is considered equivalent to the Queen Elizabeth main belt. Hood £480 at 12 degrees, Queen Elizabeth £520 at vertical. John Sanacanero, stop trying to give me a nightmare. Anyway, what I have next, though, is this one, and this is the point. The problem for the world and for our understanding of carrier development is that the only aircraft carrier type which really comes into service post-World War II, immediately, which is a new type, is the Midway class, I would argue. The Audacious class are not a fleet, are not really the epitome of the British design. That's the Malta class. If you had the Malta and the Midways in and been able to do a comparison of the two, you would have been able to see how the different philosophies of fleet carrier had truly evolved. Because I would argue in many ways the Audacious are medium fleet carriers. There's the light fleet carrier, then they're going, hang on, we need something bigger, let's build that. And then they build the true fleet carrier they're designing as the Maltas. That's going to take longer to build, and they're not sure how long the war's going to last, and they need more carriers in case they start losing off the coast of Japan. So, there's your Audacious class. And I think it would have been really good for the world to see the Malta and the Midway alongside each other and watch them convert and change. Because I need to press OK. Yeah, keep the TV going. Because the problem is you get this perception, sometimes when you're reading books, that American carrier philosophy is the, how to put it, American carrier philosophy, which is the best for them, is therefore the best for everyone, because that's the one which is dominant post-World War II. And you sort of have a sort of growing together of lines of armor versus aircraft. And the Malta class are bigger, they're about the same size and sort of same breadth in terms of as the Midways, but they still have more armor than the Midways. And different outline of their weaponry and their defenses and all those sort of things. And it would have said, look, actually the reality is that even two nations, as close as they are, as close as Britain and America are by the end of World War II, they're still building differently. even though they can both build whatever they need to build, they're still building differently because it doesn't necessarily suit them. So it would stop this idea that there should be one size fits all, because there isn't, especially not in aircraft carrier designs. One size doesn't fit all. Andrew Cox, upgrading guns. Wasn't that banned by treaty? That was why the Italians had lost their Q turrets. Yes and no. Upgrading the guns can cause an issue in the treaties, but you can upgrade the guns to an extent, or rather, you can upgrade the mountings for the guns, and you can change the barrels on the guns very quickly if you upgraded the mountings on the guns. And so you could upgrade the mountings in the interwar refits so that they could take the bigger gun. And then when war comes around, rather like armor magically gets added to cruisers, they could all suddenly have a magic upgrade. Carl Gasbeck, I've got 2.2 of 2. So, if we finish Nostrums, that's your last one I've got, and then I've got a 2 of 2. So I'm not sure where your first one is. But they are good-looking ships, and it would have been nice to have them. It would have enabled me to go, it would have enabled historians like me to sort of win the argument slightly easier and with slightly less boring down on those people we're arguing with. That one size doesn't have to fit all. It really doesn't. Again, fun fact, according to Navy weapons, the 15-inch 45 Mark II was to be 98.6 tons, and the 15-inch Mark 42 Mark I was 102.5 tons, only the gun itself. The Mark I was over-designed as it was a somewhat rushed design. So whoever created it went for make it lasting. Very true. Dan Freeman, wait, is Dr. Clark keeping up with us? We can't have this. Chat harder, everyone. I am managing to keep up so far. It's been very nice, everyone. As said, again, I'm going to mention this. Thank you very much to everyone who subscribes to the channel. Thank you to everyone who does super chats. Thank you to everyone who watches the lives, who likes the lives, who shares them. Thank you to everyone who's a patron. I'm going to be announcing the winner of the patron vote, I think, in a bit. And I thank you to basically everyone who watches. And thank you to everyone who's joined the channel as well. Currently, I think I'm 2 or possibly 2. I think I'm now 2 people joining the channel away from being able to set up, to create a new emoji. And I'm still working out what the new emoji would be. Andrew Cox, if the RN built the Maltas, would you expect further developments in carrier aircraft, or would the UK still end up with F4s without the big nose leg? If the British built the Maltas and therefore focused in and standardised on those 4 things, They might still end up with the Phantoms. They probably would still end up with the Buccaneers. The question would be what would come next. The thing is, you could operate F-14s off a modified Malta. It would be big enough. You would keep the Buccaneers and maybe go to a Buccaneer S3. So we would probably go Phantoms, Tomcats, and Buccaneers. Thank you, Colin Gasberg. You didn't have to, but thank you very much. That's good. So on topic, how would you design a carrier for Albonia? Using usual Albonia rules apply. Biden the Burn. Or the Graf Spee. I mean Graf Zeppelin, sorry. Yeah. Graf Zeppelin or Burn. Because I'm evil. Because the French carrier sounds good on paper. Good boy. Very good. You're very well behaved this evening. Andrew Cox, do you really expect the mortars to last long? I do. If the Royal Navy had built 4 mortars, then they probably wouldn't have had the cost because they'd have just got rid of the Victoriouses and the Illustriouses, and they'd probably got rid of quite a lot of the big fleet carriers straight off. Audaciouses wouldn't have probably been built, so they would probably just concentrated in on the 4 fleet carriers, which would have given them a lot of cost savings straight off the bat. And the thing is, if you have 4 decent carriers which have got space to easily expand and maintain them, it keeps going and provides something useful. And in terms of, I think the trouble is, honestly, and this is something which might affect the Falklands War, if the Royal Navy can provide carrier battle groups, i.e. 4 of them, and can provide a decent carrier battle group, I do wonder if the Royal Marines survive, because they might decide that instead of supporting the northern sort of theatre of operations with a Royal Marine Brigade, they might, just say, we're going to supply a carrier battle group to the North Atlantic. But I think they do survive. The thing is also, this is going to sound terrible, but cutting Ark Royal was a bad thing. Cutting HMS Malta, named for the island which had done all that fighting during World War II, I'm not sure there's any British government which would have survived that politically. I'm also fairly sure at least one of them would have been renamed Ark Royal very quickly. Hello, Versalis Vignus. Hello. I do have to do more about the Greek Navy at some point. They're quite cool. They get some very interesting things. Right. 1940. So this is the first thing that's coming up is, of course, Liberty ships and Victory ships and Park ships and all the other vessels which are built. But the point I'm making with this design, and I'm talking about, is the logistics and maintenance ships. This is a maintenance ship. When nations are really thinking about fighting wars, they build maintenance ships. They build things which are going to keep their fleet operating around the world, because you can't always rely on other people to come and help you. You can't. It's terrible. You'd like to be able to think you could rely on them the whole time, but you can't. So instead, you have to build your own maintenance ships. You have to build something which can support and sustain your fleet when it goes and operates around the world. And there are several people around the world who currently like to post things on Twitter. Oh, I'll be worried about the Chinese Navy or ex-Navy when they build a fleet or RFA, or they build this sort of thing, this or that. Well, I hate to inform you this, but the Chinese Navy already does have a fleet auxiliary. Not particularly massive, considering the scale of their ambitions, but it's there, and it's growing quite effectively and quite quickly. And it will get better. A lot of these things will get better. As we're fond of saying and pointing out on bilge pumps, when someone turns around and goes, well, we've had X 80, 100 years of carrier operations to draw from, this is why we're so good. The Chinese won't catch us up because of that. And you sit there and go, will it take them 100 years to catch up? Probably not, because let's be honest, the first 20 years of you operating carriers was basically you figuring out how to float the things. The next 20 years was operating largely piston engine force and trying to figure out how to mobilize for World War II, which was a lot of experience to go from whoop to dum. And let's please be blindingly obvious here. Actually, during World War II, the quality of naval aviation didn't exactly exceed. The Royal Navy went from having fully all-weather, all-night capable fighting force to still having a fully weather, all-night, all-capable fighting force. They just preferred not to fly at night as often as they had done at the beginning of the war because their pilots didn't train as much and they didn't fancy losing them because they were kind of expensive assets and they didn't need to. And the US Navy prior to World War II couldn't all fly at night, and at the end of World War II still couldn't all fly at night. In fact, a large majority of them couldn't, and the Japanese Navy won't even get started on that one. So, yeah, not really enhancing yourself there. And then the jets come in, and then there's the little jets that come in, and integration, airborne, early warning, and all these things. And of course, there is a simple fact. A lot of people like me write history books and teach lectures. And we have a lot of students. And some of them might well be Chinese Navy. And some of those students, so people who read those books might be Chinese Navy. And they can figure it out from the history books just as well as you can. So that doesn't really help. But here's the point I will be worried about the Chinese Navy. When they start building floating maintenance ships that can literally turn up and turn any port into a full service yard facility. Because that means they're serious. Because you build that sort of capability when you expect people to be bombing and taking out your facilities, which means you expect to be fighting a peer. If you're fighting a peer, that is when you're fighting someone who can take out your infrastructure. That's the basic limit of it. In the Falklands War, Argentina is not a peer. Britain can take out Argentinian infrastructure. At no point can the Argentinians really start to take out British infrastructure back in Britain. It's the same when you go through here, when you that is the reality. Nicest way, Iraq, Afghanistan, all these countries, they haven't taken out infrastructure, and they haven't, of America. Let's put this, at no point, their way of war could well be different from your perspective. You're thinking you're going to be refighting the Western Pacific in late World War II. It won't necessarily be like that, but B, it's infrastructure. And these ships are a classic example of the importance of it. In World War II, at the height of the convoy battles, when you are losing so many merchant ships, when you have so many losses, when you have all sorts of issues, and yet the Brits and the Americans are still putting aside precious merchant ship hulls, brand new merchant ship hulls, and converting them to this because it is essential to keeping their fleets going and operating. Not just in the Pacific, but in the Indian Ocean, in the Mediterranean, in the South Atlantic, everywhere in the world. Some of them are even operating in Britain. Why? Because the port facilities get bombed, and you need those port facilities back up and running and supporting your fleet out as soon as it happens. And this one of these turns up, keeps everything going until you fix the land stuff. First one, was there a class of destroyers that there are made that was designed to only work with Nelsons or the CVs? No. They never built destroyers for single-purpose roles or single. There were some destroyers which were more orientated around operating with faster faster capital ships than others. I would argue the Tribals, the L's, they're orientated around operating with faster than you normally expect, and to some extent the J's as well, faster than you would expect capital other than the previous capital ships. So they were operating with the battle cruisers, with the carriers, but that's mainly a function of their ability to maintain the speed necessary to keep up with those ships. Tobias Jeffrey, personally, China's naval domination, truthfully, won't come from their navy, but rather from the plan's interoperability with the other branches in Chinese Missile Command. Again, as I said in bilge pumps recently and several times past, I am very skeptical of the DF-21s. I think they are something which is designed to waste a lot of American money and a lot of American time. But anyone who's sensible knows the moment you launch. Let's put it this way: if Donald Trump is the president of the United States, or you have, I don't know, any of the last presidents, including the current one, who all seem to have a slightly knee-jerk reaction in a crisis, and they get told China's launching ballistic missiles, I'm sorry, I do not. I don't expect them to wait around to figure out whether those are DF-21s targeting a carrier battle group, or versions of the DF-21 attacking Guam or other parts of American forces abroad. I expect to see the nuclear umbrella employed. It's a threat which the US Navy will have to spend a lot of money countering, but the Chinese don't actually have to do anything with it. The real threat, they can do far more damage with their wave upon wave of cruise missiles, which will be coordinated by the People's Liberation Army Navy. Next one, Dr. C. What did the Allies have the most trouble keeping supplied? At one point, there was almost a shortage of rivets. It's funny, valves. Valves always seem to come up. Whenever I'm reading reports, it's always a valve shortage. Mainly because they come in all shapes and sizes and you always need more. And there are lots and the needs for lots of valves. Next one, in terms of construction. What held up Royal Navy destroyers for longest was 4.5-inch gun turrets. What held up Vanguard and various other things was Mark 37 fire control systems, because Britain was building and maxed out in its production supplies, so it was waiting on American supplies, and America was maxed out. Basically, high-end components, which are very intricate and take time to build, are what were the bottlenecks in construction. Andrew Cox, tactics and strategy win battles, logistics and maintenance wins wars. Yes, because logistics, maintenance, and repair mean you have actually equipment to fight the next battle. Dan Freeman, ballistic missiles trigger ballistic missile response, and due to fixed response plans, when China launches a ballistic missile, Pyongyang and Moscow both get nuked. I'd hope not. I'd hope they have slightly more. The trouble is, though, if America launches BMs and counter China, then Russia and North Korea, it's just not a acceptable scenario. Ballistic missiles and anything with a ballistic missile profile being launched during a wartime is not a sensible thing. You can just about maybe get away with launching one from your satellite launch facility, but it's going to cause problems. Again, the nicest way, the cruise missiles are enough of a threat on their own, and that will cause enough damage. Again, there were some very interesting ideas about this. So, post World War II, and this is coming up, of course, this is a Montana class battleship and a Type 40 Daring class destroyer. Now, I'm not going to spoil the fun by talking too much about them, but basically, it comes back to the big gun design and the idea that the big guns aren't dead. And this is the real lesson of history. Nothing has been killed more often than the gun as a weapon of war. Mines come in, guns are dead. Ramming, guns are dead. Torpedoes, guns are dead. Submarines, guns are dead. Aircraft, guns are dead. They're going to be dropping bombs. Big guns are dead. You know. Missiles, guns are dead. Every single chance you get, people try and get rid of them. And every time they end up coming back because they are very efficient means of deploying a large amount of destructive power within a certain radius. And this, of course, led to the ultra-sexy Zumwalt class, to a certain perspective, being designed around theoretically railguns, but in reality they should have been designed around a properly thought out and funded advanced gun system, which would have given them a far better basis, and then said, all right, we're future-proofing your design, so you can have the AGS, you can have the AGS upgraded to railguns at some point in the future. And really what they should have done also, and this is probably revolutionary, if you're building a 14,000-ton ship already, you know, you might as well add on an extra couple of thousand tons or so and make it just a little bit bigger and a little bit longer specifically, and add in a lot more VLS, and therefore you have your destroyer, your CGX or whatever. And they might have actually built enough of those to start helping out the Arleigh Burke fleet with the high-end mission and replace the Ticos. Because that's the problem with the Zumwalts. They were never going to be able to build enough to replace the Arleigh Burke, so pitching them as destroyers was never going to work. They're 14,000 tons, they're already in the cruiser range. If you made them 16,000 tons, you could have made them fulfill the cruiser brief as well as their own role. They certainly have enough power and enough command deck space they could have fulfilled the cruiser role if they'd had more VLS tubes. At which point, you could have actually had these rolling out as a cruiser replacement program, and the US Navy would be in a far better shape than it is. Hello, Constant Erasmus. Hello, Fluff. And so, yeah, I think honestly the lesson of history is that we have to underestimate guns that are peril. And I think that's the lesson of the 40s and 50s, that they try and, that they, you know, the battleship doesn't get built. The Montana class doesn't come about. And you can understand why. In a world of limited funding, you either have to fund your carrier or your battleship program. The carrier is the more versatile, longer ranged asset, and theoretically the more easily upgraded. And the more easily supplied at sea and rearmed at sea. But you still want the guns, and that's why you build the daring class destroyers. Trying to build new cruisers is expensive and difficult, and trying to get them built. But you need to test out your designs, you need to develop things. These are marketed wrong. They are Rumsfeld gets far too involved, and so they get the railgun program attached when really it should have been the AGS system until the railgun was ready. And arguably, I would argue the reason the US Navy has, as we speak, degraded the railgun program back to the lovely people at DARPA is simply because they don't want to have to make it the centerpiece of the DDX design. They don't want it there because if the railgun is there, then people will ask why they're not fitting it. And the reason they're not fitting is because it's not ready yet because they haven't got the capacitors ready. So they basically skewered their own themselves with the railgun earlier in the construction of these. And they shouldn't, by declaring it viable earlier than it was actually. A British subject says the word power. These are power. They are capability. They are very. It's one of the things which is often forgotten about the Zumwalts is they are very striking and impressive ships. One of them turning up in a port for a port visit is going to have an impact. It looks menacing. It looks deadly. It is the modern version of HMS Powerful. And again, I cannot overemphasize this. It is a lost scenario for the CGX problem. Because a little bit bigger, with a few more VLS and the AGS system, and you have a textbook replacement for your cruisers. And that would have been a really useful system. What is considered a too expensive bit of a white elephant for a destroyer program would have been considered a brilliant cruiser program. Because look at that. Think about that. A few more extra VLS tubes. We're talking, as I said, a couple of thousand more tons, so it's longer, slightly more spread out, and you could have a decent VLS silo block. Let's say between the bridge and the B turret, or maybe aft the bridge, above the hangar, or wherever you wanted to put it, you could put in a load of extra missiles. I know that they've got the Mark 53s all round, but a Mark 53 VLS system all round as they have, a massive Mark 41, 96 cell, maybe even bigger Mark 41 VLS centerline, or maybe even more Mark 53 centerline if they wanted to do that, would have really made them very scary, very powerful cruisers. And this is the problem with the Zumwalts. It's honestly the lack of it. It's both the over-ambition in chucking in the railguns when they weren't ready, and the under-ambition with not making the cruisers. And look, Rumsfeld is the reason the Ford simultaneously introduced 4 brand new technologies in the new class. Yeah. Can we just call the Zumwalt's cruisers? That's pretty much what they are. They're actually very good, the Val, and very stable in rough weather. So, yeah, I like the Val. Carl Gasberg, read Zumwalt Flight 2. Even putting two Volcano capable 564 turrets with the option of upgrading to 6-inch twin or 6-inch later. Could have worked. Basilis Vigulus. There is a naval myth about World War II that the Greek ship owners bribed U-boat commanders not to sink their ships, and for that purpose, flew special lights and flag buttons. Is there any evidence of this? None I've seen. There are lots of various myths around about that, but none really that I've seen as evidence. And it's the sort of thing which everyone was on the watch out for and didn't get spotted. Remember, most ships weren't actually lit up when the Greeks were actually fighting the Germans. The Free Greeks were some of the fiercest fighters. They really didn't like the Germans and the Italians for invading, because many of the Greeks they'd beaten the Italians and they would have won versus them, and then the Germans come in and kick them in the back. They really didn't like the Germans with that one. And then you have some myths, but honestly, no. WSG303, what do you think about the GFGX program and the new Constellation class? Good. Makes sense. Seth Thompson, with hypersonics coming around to the concept of interception is returning to putting up screen for the war's head. Yeah. Even ripping out the B-turret and filling space with self-defense length VLS. Honestly, you could rip out B-turret and get hypersonics in that hole. It's that big. Agreed, Stafford. Abzowski, looking at this. Since Arleigh Burkes and Tickerongers were designed, USN got a bit lost when it comes to ship design. Zumwalt. Propaganda failure. LCS, yes, LCS. Only 4-class carriers weren't a bit. 4-class, I would have said the Zumwalts aren't a propaganda failure, they're a attachment failure, because they attach railguns to them. And honestly, as I said, they should have been marketed as cruisers, then nobody would have actually batted an eyelid at their cost. And considering the way, you see, the thing is, people go, cruisers aren't politically popular and you can't build cruisers. Well, that's true in Germany, you call them frigates, and probably in Europe. But in America, they're obsessed with the numbers of cruisers they have, the Tickeronga class, etc., and maintaining them and keeping that cruiser capability. It comes up in the Senate all the time. So again, this would have been a easy 2-1 punch for the US Navy to start replacing the TICOs with this, and it would have given them a lot of capability, and they slightly an evolved version of this if they'd taken if they worked on it, but you know. Hello. Here's the scenario. It is negotiation from Washington Navy Treaty. The abolition of submarine passes as the French take the day off. How does World War II go? Well, they all talk about abolishing the submarine, and then suddenly in about the 1930s, they notice someone's building submarines. Probably Japan. When they leave the treaty, possibly Germany, but everyone's starting from scratch. So that means submarines in World War II will be at the same level they were at the end of World War I, not with 20 years of development in between. Although certain nations like Britain, etc., America might have got exceptions for certain submarines for scientific research. Yeah, so we're surprised. Because remember, the British wanted the submarine abolished for everyone but them. That was the main problem, the British argument. Take care, Andrew Cox. That's good. Would the Zumwalt's capabilities be acceptable to Congress for them to get funding past the cruisers, or would extra bells and whistles be demanded for a cruiser? No, they'd have had the capabilities, especially, as I said, I keep saying a slightly bigger, so instead of 14,000 tons, you'd have to go for a 16,000 ton design. You needed more VLS, but honestly, they would have had the power and the capabilities to pass the muster for the cruiser. As Dan Freeman says, it isn't a submarine, it's a submersible sloop. Yeah, there would have been a lot of that. And 1950s. Now, of course, I'm not going to spoil the fun for those 1950s, but I'm basically going to point out that that's a whiskey-class submarine. And that's the Royal Navy's sort of answer in terms of sub-hunter. And that's, of course, an SSK. And these days, we are finally getting round to the idea that for the last 50 or so years, we might have been talking twaddle, in that we were obsessing with SSNs, and everyone was ignoring the SSKs. And here is the thing, there is usually in the world about 4 times as many, if not 5 times as many, SSKs functioning as SSNs. So, if you fight a submarine, especially if you're a Western nation fighting submarines, you're more likely to be actually fighting against SSKs than you are SSNs. Because only America, Britain, and France maintain an all SSN fleet, from memory. Russia is vast majority of their operational submarines are SSKs. China, and the vast majority of operational submarines are SSKs. Pretty much India, vast majority of operational submarines are SSKs. And every other nation you can think of, the submarines they operate are variations on SSKs. So, more likely to be your opponent. And this is a Lada class, St. Petersburg. Yeah. Capable little thing. Scary as anything. A little black disappearing hole in the water. Eee. I was asking, but isn't Tico an Aegis cruiser, so an AA escort for a carrier? This is why I say the Zumwalts would need more VLS. But they have the radar for it. They just need the VLS to carry enough air defense missiles. They have also the commander deck space. And honestly, the modern SSK, it's very different from the SSKs that were fought in World War II. It's a very different beast. It's far more capable than the Type 21s ever dreamed of being. Now, this was the point in the previous one when I was talking about the whiskey class. We forget of the submarine scare of the early 1950s, and which seriously affected Britain, but also affected America, affected everyone in NATO, when Soviet Union was pumping out whiskies, was pumping out these submarines at a tremendous rate. Well, these days, the submarines that are being pumped out at a tremendous rate by anyone are SSKs. Still, because they are a fraction of the cost, they are crew numbers a lot less in terms of training, maintenance, and you're getting a very useful unit. It's not useful in the same way an SSN is, though. And this is the trouble. When you judge an SSK by the metrics used for an SSN, it looks like the poor man's choice, and people therefore go, oh, we're buying the better sub. But it comes back to the argument I make the whole way through. What is best for you? And I would argue that actually the Royal Navy, US Navy, and French Navy are doing the wrong thing. And I'd argue they agree with me because they're now building the variations on the extra large, uncrewed, unmanned vehicle, uncrewed undersea vehicle, or variations of it, which are all basically SSKs, but because they're uncrewed, they're not considered a challenge to the nuclear fleet. So they don't have to explain them in the budget as why we're building both SSKs and SSNs. But, let's be honest, they are SSKs. Descott, could a submarine make a loud enough noise to damage another submarine sonar as even going? Could it protect its own while knocking out enemy sensors? I think you're talking about making a sonic pulse. A similar scenario to an electromagnetic pulse. And it all depends on what those systems are and how you can protect them. So, if you could, in theory, make a loud enough sonic pulse underwater, or sound, a loud enough sound wave underwater, it might have a limited effect, such as an EMP, but it probably wouldn't. You'd almost be better off probably making an electromagnetic pulse underwater, but again, that's not going to... There's limitations on what you can do underwater. And you would probably damage your own system because there isn't much you can do to protect it. Come guys, re-Russian SSKs. Why procure SSNs to the blacks? Procure the Black or Baltics if you can get away with a dusted off Type 21 with modernish sensors and an accurate tiles. There are a lot more than a modernized Type 21, but yeah, it makes sense. It also makes sense for the Barents Sea. It makes sense for the White Sea. It makes sense for a lot of the places Russia has to deal with for SSKs. It also makes sense for a lot of the defense missions. This is the thing. If you're thinking about fighting around the world, and you're thinking about having to rapidly deploy a small number of submarines around the world, SSNs make very viable, sensible options because they can rapidly redeploy between theatres. But if you're thinking just about defending your assets or interests in that theatre, then SSKs make great sense, which is why I would be very worried about the SSKs if I were the West fighting the Chinese, because they will have a lot. And the thing is, they're not as good maybe as some of the latest, as an Astute or the latest Virginia class. But the thing is, there's probably going to be about 10 of them for each Astute or Virginia which turns up. Mm. Right, I've finished the Iron Brew. So let's see, what else do we have? Ah, yes, last slide. As I began with, if you have been watching the videos, you will notice and note that I have another bet going with my aunt. Same one who gave me the 1,000 subscriber bet. Has, after seeing the Spreadshirt shop, has decided, and by the way, link to the Spreadshirt shop is down below if you're interested in designs. It's always nice to get the Google message about sales, mainly because, as I said sort of a week technically at the moment, I'm unemployed. The joys of contract lecturing. You're technically made redundant, or rather, your contract is ended in July or August, depending on which university you're talking about, and it's not renewed till October, November. Although they do expect you to turn up to work in September and October. But we won't get into that. But no, technically, it means technically my only income is YouTube at the moment, because the book money, and none of that's come through yet because it's not being sold for sale yet. So yeah, fun times. Anyway, all hail the Blackburn, Church of the Cataclysm at Catalina, and all these are the designs available. And at some point, there is going to be HMS Unicorn up there. I'm still not sure why she hasn't come up. I'm going to have to log in Spreadshirt at some point this evening and check it again. And they are the designs. And my aunt has said if I get to 13,000 subscribers, she and my uncle will take a picture of themselves wearing Blackburn face masks, which I have kindly offered to say I will buy for them. Because, yeah, I thought I might well be nice one. Well, that's another one. Anyway, they're fun. And, of course, I have this for a hat. And I think I have a t-shirt coming with this one. I haven't yet decided between which of these I will buy something in. Probably a mug. And maybe a sticker. Or possibly a mousepad. I'm not sure. And what have we got coming up? Well, 12th September, Questions to the Brew runs out. I will need to buy some Iron Brew for that. I will be in another venue again on Sunday. So you will, yes, I'll be somewhere different again on Sunday. It's going to be fun. But I'll probably, I'm not sure where I'll be on the 16th. The 19th, Brew Ships, got plans for that one. And 11th to the 21st September, Chief Staff of the Axis Navy's coming out. You've already seen the first episode of that today. That's been Carl Raider. Tomorrow is his Japanese counterpart. And then we go to his Italian counterpart. And then on Monday, it's going to, where is it? Canaris, the intelligence officer for the Germans, and well, I know he wasn't chief of staff, but he was admiral in charge of intelligence, and I just felt, frankly, there weren't going to be that many I could write. I have enough information to talk about, so I might as well add them into this set. And then it'll go through all of them in order, and I'm doing it in order of them getting appointed, and luckily I have managed to rig it by picking the starting date that Karl Donutz's one will come out on his birthday. And then on his birthday, of course, I have a live where I'll be talking about Karl Donitz, and I'll be comparing him to the other chiefs of staff, because the thing is, you can't really compare and contrast him with the British or the American equivalents, because they had completely different strategic scenarios. So it's got to be with the Axis ones. And at one point when I started doing that was when I got the idea for the whole series, because frankly, the paucity of information around about them. Stuff Thompson at the moment, no ETA. It's going to be out soon. That's all I keep getting told by Julian, and I'm not going to. I send him messages and try and get more accurate information. At the moment, I'm getting told it's. Contrast, I'm adjecting again. I can emphasize, yes, the joy of being a contract lecturer. You are the junior of the most junior. Comments on if they're all Navy-built large uncrewed UV and sea vehicles, it can be sold to Australia, Canada, but that long-term thinking thing in politicians, since it is being built and probably could be sold. Thanks, Monic. Dr. C, could you make a chart for what makes a good admiral? I'm tempted to write a book about what makes a good Commodore, but we'll leave that to one side. Take care, John Shea. Thank you. Thank you to Stafford and Dove Squad. Daleks might be able to compare to the US submarine branch in the Pacific. Not really. Again, they're operating in a very different scenario. Don't take this the wrong way, but Donitz is actually facing more of an A team. The Japanese are very slow when it comes to an uptake on anti-submarine warfare. Mainly because, although they realized it could happen, they didn't think it would happen to them. They always planned on doing it to other people. Hello, Pavel. Hello. Unfortunately, you're tuning in just as I'm finishing. I'm going to do about 3 minutes. I've finished drinking, finished my own brew, though, so I'm sort of worried about going on too long because I will run out of voice. Congratulations, Stafford, to your younger brother's girlfriend. That's an auspicious thing, completing your first week. Usually the point at which you're most high and hopeful for the future of humanity. Week 2 is about the point at which you realise that you are going to spend most of your life saying the words, "It's in the syllabus," to 90% of the questions you're asked. It's like sometimes I don't take this the wrong way out. I love all the comments, but there are sometimes I am tempted, like I think Drac is occasionally tempted, to have a response card when I'm doing the comment responses to go, "Did you watch the video?" It's in the syllabus, is what you say a lot, or module guide, depending on where you are. Or nowadays, of course, it's on Canvas, which is the online version of the module guide. Take care, Patonka. That's good. Oh, I agree. I was thinking more about the implementation of unrestricted submarine warfare. Yeah, but again, yes and no. There are some similarities, but the thing is, he's chief of staff for the Navy, and that's what I'm comparing him to. Japanese submarine service, Japanese submarine service focused more on the scouting, anti-warship, not anti-commercial shipping. Yes and no. They're actually supposed to be able to do anti-commercial shipping. There's just a small problem with them with anti-commercial shipping. Where is the commercial shipping for them to go and get attack? Is it running far along the south or through the Indian Ocean to Australia? That's quite a long way away from them. They do try and do a bit in the Indian Ocean, and they do quite well there, but again, they run into quite well escorted convoys, and that causes a few issues. And yes, there's all sorts of interesting things going on there. That's good. The version for dealing with politicians is a card to hold up that says citation needed. Well, I always remember the joke from West Wing whenever people say that to me, and speaking as a former borough councillor, so technically closest of any of Bill Trump's to actually being a politician. Two politicians debating. One of them shouts to the other, "You're lying." The other one responds, "I know, but at least hear me out." Count week 3. No, you're not completing your homework. Is not my fault. No, I'm not accepted late. No, I don't care. You're taking other classes. Or the ultimate one. I didn't realise that we had to do the homework. I thought it was optional. It's optional as in 25% of your grade for that paper, and now because it's late, you're limited to a maximum of 40% of the marks. So I'd suggest you get it to me in the next 2 weeks, because if it's more than 2 weeks late, you get 0. Paul Bestmate, any chance of a live bilge pumps? We're working on it. There is a potential for a live at some point. We are considering a live bilge pumps and taking questions. It's an idea. Drac and I are both testing out the software in different ways, and we'll see if we can persuade Jamie to do it. And yeah, it could be interesting. Take care. Thanks, Stafford Thompson. Pleasure. Don't read me like that, Joey. That's what. The only commercial shipping that he could really attack was the Soviet Communist North. Japan didn't fancy a land war in Manchuria. No. See, the thing is, the Japanese don't so much their ships aren't able to do, or they don't want to do anti-commercial shipping. They don't have much options for anti-commercial shipping. That's more the reality of the war they're fighting. It's a problem for you. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye, DG40. Bye, Stafford Thompson. Bye, Steve Winish. Bye, Dan Freeman. I'm going to make sure that's a live chat rather than the top chat, so I can actually see. Bye, Paul Perswick. Thank you. Bye, Puntik. Bye, Melanie6040. Bye, Jess. Bye, Dub Squad. Calvin Gasberg. Bye, Frank Spasato. Tobias GL3Y. Alex and Andrew Cox, Constant Drowsiness. Thank you, Seneca Nero. And yeah, thank you, everyone, basically. It's been very nice to you, and thank you. Take care, and have fun. Thank you, Nook. And thank you, Rick Vasala. Take care, everyone, and see you Sunday. Bye-bye. Yeah, there you go.